A hostile thug with dark blue hair grabs a helpless old villager by his collar, demanding to know if there is a female elf hiding somewhere in this rural town, before violently shoving the poor old man onto the hard stone pavement with absolute contempt, leaving the terrified onlookers to whisper about this notorious gang of orphans running rampant, while others worry that the chaos of the Demon Lord's army is finally reaching them, especially with rumors of a nearby noble family being completely wiped out in flames. But the aggressive thug snaps at the crowd, warning them to stop treating this like a sideshow, as a mysterious pair of boots steps forward while someone desperately calls for the guards, prompting the impatient thug to raise his fist to beat the answers out of him, and the helpless old man can only cringe as the blow comes down. A hand suddenly catches the thug's fist mid-air, stopping the brutal blow dead in its tracks. Turns out the blue-haired youth has stepped in, casually complaining about the absolute mess of a situation, while the stunned thug can only stare in disbelief that a mere kid just blocked his attack. When the thug demands to know if he is playing hero, our boy calmly asks about the elf, prompting the arrogant thug to smirk, thinking he can easily squeeze some information out of him. But the blue-haired youth demands to be taken straight to their captain to avoid any unnecessary pain. This blatant disrespect makes a vein pop on the thug's face as his anger completely boils over, throwing a wild, furious punch to teach this cocky kid a lesson he will never forget, only to instantly end up flat on his back, staring blankly at the sky in pure confusion. He lies there utterly dazed, wondering how a single flash of light just put him on the pavement. Dusting off his hands, the blue-haired youth casually mocks the thug for putting up such a pathetic fight, before leaning in with a terrifying glare to ask how much more pain he can actually take. Meanwhile, inside a nearby hideout, an angry voice screams demands for a missing female elf, where the furious gang captain slams his fist, outraged that his crew lost to a single kid, deciding he has no choice but to step in and handle this embarrassing mess himself. Suddenly, the front doors are violently kicked open as our hero strolls in dragging his captive, leaving the stunned gang captain completely frozen, with a hilariously blank stare on his face, while the rest of his pathetic underlings can only gawk in absolute silence at the intruder, prompting the blue-haired youth to casually ask his hostage if they stumbled into the wrong address, only for Sigmul to tearfully confirm the location while begging him to get his name right. Squeezing Sigmul's face to get some answers, our boy threatens to beat the truth out of him, while the other thugs mock Sigmul for getting absolutely wrecked by a mere kid, prompting the blue-haired youth to turn his attention toward the smug boss sitting in the back, who casually asks if this is the brat currently living with the missing female elf. But when our hero demands answers, the captain smugly reveals their plan to sell her off. Hearing this disgusting confession makes the kid grit his teeth in pure silent rage, realizing that trying to reason with these lowlifes is just a complete waste of time, which only makes the clueless thugs burst out laughing as the main doors slowly slide shut, trapping them all inside the barn with a monster they are definitely not prepared for. As a terrifying blue aura erupts, he reaches for his sword to teach them a painful lesson. This gang captain points and mocks our boy, asking if that sword is even real, while claiming a fine weapon like that is completely wasted on a kid like him. But his smug attitude completely evaporates when he witnesses what happens next, as Eldmia Aga casually bends the solid steel bar with his bare hands, leaving the surrounding thugs utterly paralyzed with fear at his monstrous strength, prompting the terrified boss to grit his teeth in sheer silent desperation, screaming at his men that it must be some kind of cheap trick, which sends his desperate lackeys charging forward with all their weapons raised. Unfazed by the oncoming assault, Eldmia simply stares them down with cold eyes, realizing this pathetic group is far more desperate than he initially thought. Watching from the sidelines, Cheryl and a young boy realize this fight is way out of their league, especially when the blue-haired youth starts channeling magic, his boots glowing with a swirling blue aura, before he launches himself forward like a blue streak, completely bypassing the charging lackeys, leaving the smug gang captain completely frozen as the kid closes the distance in a millisecond. And before the boss can even blink, our boy winds up a devastating magic-infused punch, slamming it directly into his face with enough force to rewrite his entire life choices, which sends the screaming gang captain crashing violently into the floor with his eyes rolled back, unleashing a massive shockwave of dust and debris that rattles the entire barn, prompting the remaining thugs and Cheryl to stare in absolute shock at how fast the boss got folded, while the blue-haired youth casually stands over his unconscious opponent to deliver a chilling final warning. Standing tall with his arms crossed, Eldmia Iga delivers a final chilling warning to the defeated gang, telling them to never make the mistake of crossing him again if they value their lives. Before the scene shifts to a quiet, snow-covered cabin nestled deep within the peaceful mountains, where a beautiful blonde elf casually questions him about his sudden detour into a street fight, pointing out his hypocrisy since he previously claimed those thugs weren't even worth his time, prompting Accilia and Darinia to demand a straight answer from her troublesome little brother. Laughing nervously, the boy tries to play it cool and wave off her concerns as nothing, explaining that he simply couldn't stand by while those lowlifes spoke trash about his beloved sister, which completely disarms her anger, though she still worries about his dangerous habit of throwing punches, before she asks why a supposedly instant fight kept him out until the sun went down. Eldmia Iga sits before three kneeling kids, realizing they aren't quite who they claim to be. pinching a kid's cheek, calling them out for being mere runaways, causing trouble in other villages. And after scolding them, he happily watches the troublemakers sprint all the way back home. But when he turns back to the remaining group, he wonders why they aren't leaving too, only for the tearful kids to reveal that they have absolutely no home left to return to, leaving our boy to realize that these poor children are actually real helpless war orphans, prompting him to scratch his head in defeat, knowing his soft heart won't let him walk away. Back in the cabin, Aciliar Enderinia listens as he explains his quest to find them a safe home, admitting that while he has his sister, these kids just need a single chance to survive, before laughing off his own sudden burst of heroism, feeling completely embarrassed by his own sweet speech. Overjoyed by his sweet words, Aciliar Enderinia tackles Eldmia Iga into a massive chair-toppling hug. Landing flat on their backs, the siblings stare at the ceiling and realize 3 years have already passed, with Aciliar softly smiling as she admits this peaceful life feels like an absolute dream, prompting Eldmia to rest his head back, wondering what would have happened if they never crossed paths. Suddenly, his mind drifts back to a burning, ruined village painted in the harsh colors of sunset, where a much younger Eldmia was crying and panting heavily while desperately clutching a heavy sword, facing a captive Aciliar who stood bound in heavy iron chains and a slave collar, until his exhausted grip finally gave out, letting the blade clatter uselessly onto the dusty stone floor, leaving the young elf to stare down at the weeping boy who had tried to save her, surrounded by the lifeless bodies of his people on the tragic day he lost absolutely everything. Aciliar Enderinia desperately flees through the ruined village while her captors scream to search the area. Armed thugs tear the settlement apart, furious that their highly valuable target has somehow slipped away. One aggressive bandit kicks open a wooden door, hoping to catch her hiding inside, while their ruthless leader rages that their lives are forfeit if they fail to capture her. Meanwhile, a young Eldmia Iga stands powerless in the chaos, clutching a precious silver locket, which pops open to reveal a cherished portrait of a kind, smiling woman from his past. But a brutal hand suddenly snatches the keepsake, violently ripping the chain right off his neck, as the greedy leader steals his only treasure, dismissing his lackeys' worries about her magic, explaining with a wicked grin that the heavy collar on her neck completely seals her powers, leaving a terrified Aciliar Enderinia shivering in the shadows, desperately searching for a place to hide. Gasping for breath, Aciliar Enderinia desperately pushes forward while trying to outrun her ruthless captors, but a relentless pursuer kicks open a nearby door to search the empty rooms, forcing the terrified elf to huddle in the shadows while praying they don't spot her, only to gasp in sheer panic as footsteps suddenly echo right outside her hiding spot. But instead of a bandit, a young Eldmia Iga stumbles right into her room, leaving the poor kid completely frozen in shock at the sight of her chains. Meanwhile, the frustrated bandit leader decides he is done playing games and activates a magical tracking orb, which instantly triggers the heavy collar around Aciliar's neck to glow with volatile energy, sending a painful surge of electricity through her body that makes her scream in pure agony, alerting every single thug in the area to her exact location inside the wooden cabin. Panting heavily on the floor, Aciliar Enderinia curses her bad luck as her captors finally corner her. This greedy bandits drag the bound elf outside, planning to plunder the rest of the village next, while Aciliar can only worry about the safety of the helpless kid she tried to protect, remembering how she desperately shoved young Eldmia Iga into a wooden wardrobe to keep him safe. But their escape is suddenly interrupted when a strange noise echoes from the nearby cabin. Turns out, young Eldmia Iga has stumbled right out of his hiding spot, clutching a heavy sword, trembling in absolute terror as he realizes he has just exposed himself to the ruthless bandits, leaving Aciliar completely devastated that the boy threw away his only chance at survival. Spotting the new captive, the smug bandit leader decides the kid will fetch a decent price too, before drawing his sword to threaten the trembling boy into surrendering without a fight. Tears streaming down his face, young Eldmia Iga desperately insists his parents must still be alive, but the ruthless bandits only burst out laughing, mocking the poor kid's absolute denial, before their leader sneers, explaining that the Demon Lord's army completely wiped out the entire village, leaving nothing behind but burning ruins and a trail of lifeless bodies painted in blood. Stunned by the horrific truth, the young boy clutches his arm in sheer paralyzing shock. But when the leader demands total obedience, Eldmia suddenly swings his heavy sword with surprising speed, slicing clean through the bandit's throat and leaving the arrogant boss gasping in his own blood, sending the remaining thugs into a wild panic as their leader suddenly collapses onto the dirt, only to freeze when they look at the kid, whose eyes now glow with a terrifying cold light, though Eldmia himself can only tremble as the heavy sword begins moving entirely on its own. This remaining bandits panic, wondering how a mere kid suddenly unlocked such terrifying power, whispering to each other about how much a legendary magic sword would fetch on the black market. But their greedy daydreaming is instantly cut short when a blade is pressed against their throats, as another ruthless bandit threatens to execute anyone who dares to turn back and run, leaving the terrified lackeys with absolutely no choice but to face the monstrous kid head-on. Screaming in desperation, the thugs charge forward with all their weapons raised to crush young Eldmia Iga, while a captive Aciliar Enderinia desperately screams for him to run away and save himself. himself. Instead, one greedy thug rushes ahead with his axe, fully expecting an incredibly easy payday, only to freeze in sheer terror as a blinding red flash suddenly cuts through the air, with young Eldmia Iga unleashing a devastating magic-infused slash that completely tears his opponent apart. Moving like a blue streak of lightning, young Eldmia Iga blitzes through the battlefield, his eyes glowing with a terrifying light as he grips his heavy blade, leaving the panicked gang captain sweating bullets as he tries to process this impossible power, especially when the kid casually slices through another thug, painting the dirt in fresh blood, prompting a stunned Aciliar Enderinia to realize this isn't the work of a magic weapon. But before Eldmia can finish off the rest, a harsh voice commands him to freeze. Turns out the desperate gang captain has grabbed Aciliar, pressing a sharp blade against her throat, instantly muffling her desperate warnings as he violently clamps his hand over her mouth, though he secretly has no intention of actually harming such a highly valuable slave, plotting to steal the kid's sword and execute him the moment he lets his guard down. Looking down in silence, young Eldmia Iga listens as the bandit leader threatens his hostage's life, prompting the kid to immediately toss his heavy sword over to save the captive elf, which sends the blade spinning through the air while the greedy boss prepares to catch it, violently shoving Aciliar Enderinia to the ground as he scrambles to claim his ultimate prize, laughing at how easily the foolish kid gave up his only weapon to save a slave. Leaping forward, the ecstatic leader reaches out to grab the blade, dreaming of endless wealth, only to freeze in confusion as Eldmia blindsides him, proving it was never a magic weapon, leaving the young boy sitting amidst the carnage of the defeated bandits in absolute exhaustion. Screaming in pure frustration, the traumatized 8-year-old curses his terrible luck in this cruel world, while Aciliar Enderinia watches in utter shock, realizing the kid's terrifying power was entirely his own. Young Eldmia Iga uses pure martial prowess to make the bandits believe his sword is magical, cleverly exploiting their greed and psychology to completely divert their attention in the heat of battle, before snatching a weapon from a fallen foe to finish off the remaining threat with terrifying precision, leaving the exhausted 8-year-old sitting amidst the bloody wreckage of his ruined home. Until Aciliar Enderinia slowly approaches the trembling boy, asking why he risked his life to save her, prompting Eldmia to coldly reply that he never actually had any intention of saving her, explaining that he simply refused to stand by while ruthless bandits destroyed his beloved home, which catches the elf completely off guard before she asks if he is actually a powerful mage. But the kid just shakes his head, recalling how he overheard the raiders discussing her sealed powers, forcing Aciliar to quietly admit that her magical abilities are indeed locked away by her heavy collar. Smiling amidst the ashes, young Eldmia Iga realizes fortune has finally smiled on him, as he holds out the glowing blue tracking orb and offers the captive elf a deal, leaving Aciliar Enderinia completely stunned to see the very device that sealed her magic, while the clever kid proposes trading her freedom for 8 years of loyal companionship, asking her to protect him and stay by his side until he finally reaches adulthood, knowing he has absolutely no family or allies left in this brutal, war-torn world. With winter fast approaching, the desperate boy admits he simply wants a chance to survive, but his deep trip down memory lane is suddenly cut short by a familiar voice, snapping Eldmia Iga back to the present as he blinks in utter confusion, only for Walter to grab him from behind, playfully teasing him for spacing out. Walter playfully smacks Eldmia Iga, teasing him about the epic scolding he got from his sister, recalling how our boy effortlessly flattened those annoying local delinquents with a single devastating blow, though Eldmia doesn't exactly feel praised while his friend laughs off the entire situation. Suddenly, Walter pulls out a shiny red apple and offers it to the confused youth, presenting the fresh fruit as a genuine token of gratitude for keeping the peace, only for his angry father to immediately scream at him for giving away free merchandise. Eldmia can only smile as the bickering duo continues to argue over the stolen treat, but the peaceful moment is instantly shattered when a desperate voice calls out his name, revealing a panting, terrified youth who looks like he just ran a marathon through hell, accompanied by a shocked companion who instantly recognizes Eldmia from their previous encounter. Eldmia Iga asks the panting youth what happened as the boy struggles to catch his breath. This panicked messenger explains that some suspicious thugs have suddenly arrived to kidnap the villagers. Hearing this, Eldmia's eyes widen in sheer shock as a cold fury washes over him, instantly triggering traumatic memories of his childhood home burning down in a sea of flames, recalling the absolute despair of losing everything in a single moment while being completely powerless. A brutal reminder of what happens when you lack the strength to protect your loved ones, especially now that he has finally built a peaceful new life in the town of Ogwin, alongside his beloved sister Aciliar Enderinia, who means more to him than anything in the world. Clenching his fist, the young warrior makes a silent, bloodthirsty vow to himself, demanding to know where the intruders are, ready to slaughter anyone who dares threaten his sister. Two shady thugs corner a terrified Cheryl, demanding she shut up and follow them, leaving the poor girl completely panicked as she demands to know who they are, but the smug kidnappers only smirk, ordering her to keep her mouth shut. Meanwhile, a mysterious hooded client watches from the shadows to confirm her identity, prompting Cheryl to realize these creeps are targeting her specifically for her red hair, as the hooded mastermind promises a hefty reward once they secure the target. only for a brute to violently grab her wrist to drag her away. This blue-haired youth suddenly blitzes in with a devastating kick to the thug's face, sending the shocked hooded client stumbling back in absolute disbelief at the sudden intrusion, while Cheryl looks up with a relieved smile, calling out for Eldmia Iga. Standing triumphantly over the fallen thug, the blue-haired youth demands to know who these intruders actually are. His icy blue eyes lock onto the remaining enemy, radiating a terrifying aura of pure, unadulterated anger, while the frustrated hooded mastermind curses his bad luck, realizing they completely underestimated the girl's security. Cracking his knuckles, the blue-haired youth admits he feels deeply insulted by their pathetic kidnapping attempt, prompting another arrogant thug to charge forward blindly, completely oblivious to the monster standing right before him. Naturally, the overconfident attacker is instantly flattened, leaving our hero casually sitting on his defeated foe. Turning his attention to the hooded mastermind, the youth demands answers while the villain sighs in disappointment, explaining that targeting Cheryl is a direct declaration of war since he originally saved her, before casually gesturing for the mysterious leader to step up and try his luck, which prompts the hooded mastermind to draw his blade, warning the kid not to get cocky. This hooded mastermind lunges forward with a deadly slash, but the blue-haired youth effortlessly dodges the strike, leaving the assassin completely stunned that a mere kid could react to his lightning-fast blade. But before the villain can recover, our hero scoops up a handful of dirt from the ground, pocket-sanding the arrogant leader right in the face with zero hesitation and absolute disrespect, forcing the blinded mastermind to stumble back while clutching his burning eyes in sheer disbelief, desperately trying to clear his vision while cursing this incredibly cheap but highly effective tactic, only for the blue-haired youth to immediately follow up with a brutal kick to his chest, sending the hooded mastermind flying backward to crash hard against the dirt in absolute defeat. Standing triumphantly, the youth casually demands to know who sent him and what they want, prompting the humiliated villain to glare back with pure hatred, utterly loathing this monstrous brat. Glaring with absolute hatred, the defeated mastermind vows to murder the kid for this humiliating defeat. But his thoughts are cut short when he hears a sudden commotion approaching from behind. Realizing the angry villagers have arrived, the hooded villain decides it is too risky to stay, so he quickly reaches into his cloak to grab a hidden smoke bomb for a quick escape. A massive explosion of thick gray smoke suddenly blankets the entire street, blinding the pursuing crowd. Coughing through the dense fog, Eldmia Iga tries to locate his target while the villagers check on him, only to realize the cowardly leader has already vanished, leaving his defeated lackeys groveling on the dirt. Looking down at the trembling thugs, Eldmia coldly points out that their boss has completely abandoned them, cracking his knuckles as a terrifying blood-red aura flares up to demand answers about the runaway leader. Terrified, the thugs immediately beg for mercy and confess they were ordered to kidnap the red-haired girl. Confused by their sudden mention of nobility, Eldmia Iga demands to know what they are talking about. This beaten thug explains the rumor of a wealthy noble daughter who survived the war, but Eldmia doesn't care about rumors and demands the true identity of their hooded boss. Realizing the terrified thug is actually telling the truth about knowing absolutely nothing. After tying the kidnappers up back to back, our boy decides to leave them for the town guards, before turning to check on Cheryl and asking if she was harmed during the chaos, prompting the trembling girl to admit she had no idea such dangerous people were targeting her, so Eldmia advises her to head straight to the inn and rest for the night, leaving Cheryl standing alone in the quiet street, deeply lost in her own thoughts. Meanwhile, Eldmia returns home only to freeze in shock at the unexpected sight before him. Stepping inside the Alicia Inn, Eldmia Iga freezes in utter shock at the bustling, lively crowd. Concerned friends immediately swarm Rivi to ask about her terrifying near-kidnapping, but she reassures them. Suddenly, a panicked boy runs up begging her for help because they are incredibly short-handed. Eldmia watches in awe as Rivi calmly delegates tasks and manages the busy schedule like a pro. At that exact moment, innkeeper Alicia spots our boy and welcomes him with a booming voice. She immediately praises him for punishing the thugs, but Eldmia humbly deflects the credit back to her, recalling how she took in the local kids and brought this rundown tavern back to life. But the robust woman looks completely bewildered, insisting she had absolutely nothing to do with it. Confused, Eldmia asks who saved the business, prompting Alicia to point directly at a hard-working Rivi. It turns out the red-haired girl worked tirelessly with local priests to make the inn truly prosper. Eldmia Ega listens as Alicia praises the red-haired girl's incredible intellect and business-saving skills. But our boy immediately locks onto a crucial detail, asking if she can actually read and write. Alicia confirms it, noting that the young girl handles complex paperwork with absolute ease, which makes Eldmia realize her advanced grammar and vocabulary are far too refined for a simple peasant, instantly connecting her back to the rumors of a surviving noble daughter who vanished during the war. Suddenly, Rivi is startled out of her thoughts by a sudden shadow looming right behind her, gasping in sheer shock as a firm hand suddenly clamps down on her shoulder out of nowhere, only to find Eldmia Iga staring back, demanding to know if she recognizes the hooded mastermind. Flustered, Rivi desperately tries to deflect his questions and demands he let go of her immediately. But the determined youth simply drags her away to get some real answers in private. Dragged into an empty room, Rivi gasps in shock as the heavy door slams shut behind them. Clutching her chest, the flustered girl wonders why her heart is suddenly beating so incredibly fast. remembering the exact same intense sensation she felt when Eldmia Iga rescued her from those thugs, quickly trying to shake off the embarrassing thought that she might actually find him a bit cool. Before she can spiral any further, Eldmia Iga calls out her name with a deadpan expression, prompting a panicked Revi to desperately bug for more time because she is not mentally prepared, leaving our boy completely baffled by her weird outburst before he gets straight to the point. Directly confronting her, he demands to know if she is the missing noble daughter from the rumors. He explains that her advanced education and the kidnapper's specific target criteria make her the prime suspect. Revi nervously scoffs at his wild theory, desperately demanding to know what actual proof he has. Eldmia Iga stares intently, explaining that his suspicions aren't wild guesses because the proof is absolutely undeniable, pointing out how she single-handedly expanded the inn's business and set up vocational support for the local kids. Not to mention drafting official documents and managing complex accounting that no ordinary street orphan could ever handle. Leaving Revi completely speechless as he concludes she must have received a high-class education from a young age. Gesturing calmly, our boy acknowledges she has her secrets but insists it is time to start talking, warning the terrified girl that her mysterious kidnappers will definitely strike again if they do nothing. But when Revi stubbornly refuses to speak, Eldmia sighs and decides not to force the issue, prompting the anxious girl to gasp in shock, demanding to know what he plans to do next. Eldmia calmly reveals that he tracked the kidnapper's trail to a hooded mastermind hiding in the nearby woods, which instantly panics Revi as she realizes our hero intends to raid their hideout completely alone. Eldmia Iga tells Revi to wait at the inn, ignoring her warning about their dangerous enemies. She explains that the mysterious hooded leader belongs to a deadly underground assassin syndicate, but our boy casually shrugs it off, refusing to let kidnappers run wild in broad daylight. Looking down in shame, Revi tearfully apologizes and blames herself for dragging him into this mess, only for Eldmia to gently tap her head with his sheathed sword in mild frustration, telling her to stop blaming herself when the real villains are the ones targeting her. Revi blushes deeply as he gives her head another reassuring pat with his sword hilt, before he confidently thumps his chest and promises to handle the rest of the threat, flashing a cocky grin while reminding her that he is far stronger than she thinks. Meanwhile, deep in the moonlit forest, a sinister voice mocks someone for crawling right back. Three thugs gather around a campfire with the hooded mastermind furiously complaining about his failed mission. One of his subordinates tries to calm him down, pointing out they still found the target, but the humiliated leader only seethes with rage, swearing vengeance for that highly disrespectful pocket sand attack. This level-headed thug warns him to stay put, reminding him of Sir Delta's strict orders to wait, which only insults the arrogant leader further, prompting him to snap back at his subordinate's insolence, until a sudden rustling sound in the nearby bushes instantly cuts their heated argument short. Gripping his sword hilt, the suspicious leader orders his men to investigate the noise immediately, sending two nervous thugs to peer cautiously into the dark, overgrown foliage. Although they find nothing, their boss angrily demands a thorough search since wild animals avoid campfires, only for the blue-haired youth to suddenly ambush them with a lethal aerial strike. This blue-haired youth drops from above, delivering a devastating slash to an unsuspecting thug, leaving the startled bandit to scream in agony as blood splatters across the dark forest, while the blue-haired youth lands gracefully, his eyes glowing with a cold, predatory light. Watching the ambush unfold, the hooded mastermind grinds his teeth in absolute fury and panic, frantically ordering his remaining men to swarm the kid and cut him down immediately. But the blue-haired youth effortlessly deflects their desperate blades with his own glowing sword, delivering a brutal counterslash that sends another screaming thug crashing to the dirt before spinning through the chaos to slice down the rest of the surrounding guards, his focused gaze locking onto his true target as a powerful blue aura flares up, unleashing a massive horizontal strike that tears through the air to finish the fight. This blue-haired youth executes a devastating aerial slash, leaving the hooded gang captain cursing in sheer frustration. Landing smoothly, the youth readies his glowing blade as the remaining thugs charge to defend their boss. With a single blinding flash, he slices right through them before they can even register his movement. Shocked by the carnage, the gang captain sweats bullets while struggling to comprehend the kid's monstrous strength. Turning around with a cocky smirk, the blue-haired youth mockingly welcomes the cowardly leader to their rematch. Infuriated by the disrespect, the hooded villain draws his weapon and vows to silence the brat forever, only for their blades to collide in a spectacular explosion of sparks and raw power. But the gang captain suddenly freezes in absolute shock as a familiar, terrifying sensation washes over him, realizing the young warrior is actually wielding raw, unrefined magical energy directly through his sword. Normally, humans must refine their mana into spells or physical auras rather than using it raw. This hooded gang captain struggles to block the attack, completely overwhelmed by the kid's insane power, while the blue-haired youth effortlessly channels raw, unrefined magical energy directly through his blade, leaving the terrified leader to realize he stands absolutely zero chance against this monstrous opponent. With a single blinding flash of blue light, the youth delivers a devastating finishing blow, sending the defeated gang captain crashing to the dirt in a pool of his own blood. Looking down with cold indifference, the young warrior decides he has wasted enough time, turning his attention to the sole surviving thug who is currently trembling against a wooden wagon, before grabbing the terrified bandit by his collar and lifting him off the ground, demanding to know the true identity of the mastermind pulling the strings from the shadows, warning the shaking thug to talk fast because his sister will absolutely kill him if he is late. A massive red wyvern roars under the full moon, completely terrifying Walter and the blue-haired youth. But the blue-haired youth immediately springs into action, leaping high with his sword drawn, delivering a brutal downward strike that smashes directly into the roaring beast's snout, sending the massive wyvern crashing to the ground right next to a trembling Walter. Our young warrior sheathes his blade, realizing this is his first time seeing a real wyvern, which are famous for being the fastest mounts around despite their insanely high upkeep costs. Meaning whoever owns this beast is definitely not some run-of-the-mill street thug. Suddenly, the blue-haired youth freezes as a crucial detail catches his attention, spotting another identical carriage parked quietly deep within the dark, foggy forest clearing, while Walter looks on in absolute shock as a sudden threat approaches from behind. Pointing his sword at the trembling thug, the blue-haired youth demands to know where the second wyvern is. Terrified for his life, the bandit quickly confesses that a knight named Delta took the beast. This revelation hits the blue-haired youth hard as he realizes he was completely outmaneuvered, cursing his own carelessness for falling into a trap designed to lure him away from Revi. Meanwhile, back at the inn, a defenseless Revi lies completely unconscious after being captured, as her mysterious captor hoists her over his shoulder and prepares to board the massive wyvern. Although the hooded kidnapper successfully secures his target, he suddenly grumbles about being played. Slowly waking up from her forced slumber, a groggy Revi struggles to comprehend her surroundings, only to gasp in sheer terror as she realizes they are soaring high above the clouds, leaving her completely helpless as the giant red beast flies her away to an unknown destination. Revi gasps in sheer disbelief as she realizes she is soaring through the clouds on a massive wyvern, while her captor coldly explains they are heading to a destination befitting her true noble status, warning her to behave because falling from this extreme height would end very badly for her, as the red beast flies further away from the village and deep into enemy territory, although Revi clings to the hope that the villagers will quickly notice her sudden disappearance. This ruthless knight casually reveals that he left absolutely no survivors behind at the inn, leaving the terrified girl completely frozen in horror as the grim reality sinks in. He explains that burning down the village was just a clean way to eliminate any loose ends, prompting Revi to desperately scream that Eldmia Iga will definitely come to rescue her, only for the knight to scoff, confident his elite forest ambush team has already dealt with him. Delta confidently assumes the blue-haired youth is already dead, imagining him lying in a pool of blood, while Revi desperately wishes she had convinced the stubborn kid to stay far away from this mess, tearfully blaming herself for dragging him into a deadly conflict that was never his to fight. Her captor coldly claims she will soon forget those worthless commoners once they reach the royal capital, but his arrogant speech is suddenly cut short by a blinding blue light shining directly from above, revealing the blue-haired youth diving straight out of the clouds with his glowing sword raised high, leaving the terrified knight to stare in absolute disbelief as the young warrior closes the distance. With a single devastating downward slash, the kid drives his blade deep into the flying beast's head, showering the panicked captor in blood as he struggles to comprehend how a mere child caught up, completely frozen in horror as he realizes his massive wyvern was just defeated in one strike. Eldmia Iga dives from the heavens, his blade carving a bloody arc right through the wyvern's snout, forcing Delta to draw his sword in a panic as their blades collide with a deafening screech. But our boy doesn't back down, channeling his raw magical energy to push the knight back, keeping his footing on the thrashing beast's back while preparing for another high-altitude strike. This reckless assault completely baffles Delta, who wonders if the crazy kid intends to kill them all, especially when Eldmia delivers another brutal slash that sends fresh wyvern blood raining into the sky, leaving the panicked knight to realize the kid must have dropped from an even higher altitude, spotting another flying beast soaring far above them and suspecting a coordinated ambush is underway. Assuming someone betrayed his location to let Eldmia pull off this insane mid-air rescue mission, only for Delta's eyes to flare with purple mana as he prepares to unleash his true power. Eldmia Iga spins through the air, his glowing blade carving bright arcs of blue and purple mana, but the sheer force of the high-altitude wind makes it incredibly hard to maintain his balance, while Delta confidently channels his dark purple aura, boasting that his combat experience is vastly superior, prompting our boy to dive headfirst into a direct clash, completely ignoring the knight's arrogant speech. As Delta swings his glowing blade with lethal intent, Eldmia barely dodges the deadly purple slash, turning his momentum into a brutal light-infused kick aimed straight at the knight's smug face. This sudden physical strike completely catches the elite knight off guard, shattering his absolute confidence, especially when a blinding flash of light suddenly erupts directly behind the young warrior's silhouette. realizing too late that Eldmia used the rising sun to blind him before delivering the final blow. With the enemy dealt with, Eldmia grabs a bewildered Rivi and tells her to hold on tight. Eldmia Iga catches Rivi midair, both of them screaming as they plummet through the sky, landing heavily on the back of the second Weavern that was waiting just below them, while their terrified pilot celebrates the success of this absolutely insane rescue plan. Rivi tearfully thanks her savior, only to notice something is terribly wrong with him, revealing a massive bloody gash torn right across the young warrior's chest. It turns out Delta managed to land a lethal counterattack during their split-second clash, causing Eldmia to suddenly lose consciousness and slump forward into Rivi's arms, leaving her to scream his name in panic as the wyvern flies them towards safety. Sometime later, our boy suddenly gasps awake, his eyes wide with confusion. Realizing he is back in his own bed with his worried sister sleeping right beside him, Eldmia Ega slowly opens his eyes, trying to make sense of his peaceful surroundings, only to find his sister Acilier and Darinia fast asleep while tightly holding his hand. But the slight movement of his fingers instantly wakes the blonde elf up. She bolts upright in absolute shock, her eyes wide as she realizes he is finally awake, immediately launching into a frantic lecture about how much he terrified her this time. Before our boy can even formulate a proper excuse, she pulls him into a tight hug, prompting Eldmia to gently pat her back while offering a quiet, apologetic smile. And when she once calms down, Acilier mentions that a certain red-haired girl has been visiting daily. Right on cue, the door swings open to reveal a completely stunned Rivi standing there, who wastes zero time throwing herself into his arms to cry tears of pure relief. Instead of a sweet reunion, Revi immediately starts pummeling her boy for sleeping 3 whole days, while his sister Acilier stands by the door, quietly giggling at their chaotic bickering. Once the beating stops, Eldmia asks if her new outfit means she reunited with her noble family, prompting the red-haired girl to strike a proud pose and boast about her sudden upgrade in status. But her playful mood quickly fades as she looks down, struggling to find the right words. Gently taking his hand in hers, she musters up the courage to make a life-changing proposal, asking Eldmia if he will leave his quiet village and accompany her to the royal capital, only for our boy to instantly decline without a second thought, completely ruining her dramatic moment. He explains that he has a massive goal of his own, requiring him to get much stronger. And though she suggests training with the capital's knights, he declares Acilier is his only master. Acilier proudly channels her glowing blue mana, reminding everyone how insanely powerful elven mages truly are. Yet Rivi remains skeptical, wondering what happens if they encounter someone even stronger than his sister, prompting Eldmia to scoff at the idea just as a massive armored boot steps into the room, laughing that some legendary powerhouse would never waste their precious time on a kid like him, when a towering, heavily armored knight suddenly materializes right behind his back. Our boy freezes instantly, a cold sweat breaking out as his instincts scream in absolute panic, scrambling backward in shock because he failed to sense this absolute monster's presence at all. This kid immediately barks out a demand to know who this terrifying intruder is, until Rivi calmly steps in front of him to greet the legendary Sir Ekaf with a smile, leaving the veteran knight to bow respectfully, relieved to find his young lady completely safe. Rivi is revealed to be a member of the legendary Rivian family, the ultimate shield of the kingdom, which completely blows Eldmia Iga's mind as he struggles to process her insanely high noble status, especially after seeing a map showing her family's massive territory compared to his tiny hometown, proving this seemingly ordinary girl actually carries the prestigious bloodline of a powerful Margrave. Our boy stands in absolute disbelief, realizing her true identity is way bigger than any local rumor, when the towering knight suddenly looks down and demands to know if he is indeed Eldmia. Sir Ekhoff wonders how a mere kid managed to defeat a powerful foe like Dandel, but instead of being intimidated, Eldmia immediately snaps back and tells the giant to back off, furiously demanding to know where this so-called guardian was when Revi was fighting for her life. Terrified of a fight, Revi quickly steps in to declare that the entire mess was actually her fault. Sir Ekaf coldly dismisses our boy, claiming this political mess is none of his business. This arrogant dismissal instantly triggers Eldmia Iga, who barks back in pure frustration. But the veteran knight quickly pivots, offering to take the kid on as his personal disciple, prompting Rivi to nervously explain that this was her master plan to help him get stronger, revealing that Sir Ekaf is actually the legendary king's third sword and a top-tier powerhouse. This towering knight stares down at Eldmia, revealing he already did a thorough background check, noting how the kid wiped out local thugs and warned everyone not to cross him, before bringing up the tragic day Eldmia lost his parents to the Demon Lord's army, questioning if his obsessive drive for power is fueled entirely by a childish desire for revenge. Furious, Eldmia throws a wild punch only for the veteran knight to block it effortlessly. Sir Ekaf effortlessly catches the kid's wild punch with his heavily armored hand, lecturing Eldmia Iga about how letting emotions control his movements only makes his form sloppy. But our boy immediately pulls back to launch a lightning-fast follow-up kick, catching the veteran knight completely off guard as he senses the sudden shift in momentum. Eldmia's leg collides with Ekaf's guard in a massive burst of glowing blue mana, letting the kid flash a smug grin before his eyes suddenly widen in pure shock, realizing the legendary knight blocked the strike effortlessly and even praises it as a fine attack. This sheer force of the block sends Eldmia sliding backward, crashing heavily onto the floor. while Sir Ekaf points out that his freshly reopened chest wound makes him unfit to fight, prompting our boy to furiously yell that a legendary title is worthless if you show up too late. Sir Ekaf surprisingly agrees with the kid, admitting that even legendary titles can't save everyone, showing a grim flashback of innocent villagers fleeing in terror from massive rampaging demons, before the veteran knight places a heavy armored hand onto our boy's shoulder, declaring that the only way to protect people is the total eradication of the enemy, which is why they desperately need insanely gifted young warriors just like him. Formally inviting Eldmia Ega to join him and become a powerful blade of the kingdom, our boy silently grits his teeth, weighing the heavy burden of this sudden proposal. Sometime later, Eldmia walks down a sunny path toward his sister waiting under a tree, quietly calling out to Azilier and Darinia as she stands there in her simple white dress, only for his sister to immediately read his mind and ask if he is really leaving. Azilier admits she saw this day coming, even if it arrived much sooner than expected, while our boy explains that he is willing to do absolutely anything to get stronger. Clutching his shirt, Eldmia sincerely thanks his sister for taking care of him these past 3 years, prompting the blonde elf to offer a soft, bittersweet smile as the wind rustles her hair, catching Eldmia completely off guard when she softly calls out his nickname, before she spreads her arms wide with a bright smile, demanding one final goodbye hug. These two siblings share a warm, emotional embrace under the shade of their favorite tree, and soon after, a horse-drawn carriage begins its long journey toward the royal capital, where a curious Revi suddenly notices a brand new accessory dangling from our boy's ear, leaving Eldmia to explain it is an elven parting gift to ensure he keeps his promise. Revi is blushing and flustered, demanding to know what kind of promise he made to his sister, while their carriage rolls away, leaving Acilier standing on the grassy hill to watch them depart. She offers a quiet, bittersweet smile as the wind gently rustles her long blonde hair. Meanwhile, deep within the royal capital, the massive and prestigious Ogatorf estate stands under the bright sun, where a fierce blonde swordswoman fumes over her father taking in a ruffian as a disciple, angrily crumpling a letter in her gloved hand while her butler stands silently behind her, before she tightly grips the hilt of her sword, muttering Eldmia Iga's name with pure venom, promising to personally show this country bumpkin just how terrifying her noble family can truly be. Back on the road, the horse-drawn carriage continues its steady journey toward the bustling capital. Inside the cabin, Revi explains the dangerous political rift between the royalists and the greedy aristocrats who targeted her. Revi explains that as the last underage heir of her prestigious family, she has zero actual power, leaving greedy nobles eager to use her as a helpless puppet to pull their political strings, hoping to weaponize her family's legendary name in their ongoing bitter feud against the royalists. Hearing this, Eldmia wonders why she didn't just run straight to the royalists for protection, but the red-haired girl insists she must be the one leading her family's grand revival, explaining with a smirk that the public absolutely loves a good dramatic comeback story. If she had just gone crying to the crown immediately, she would be dismissed as pathetic, prompting Eldmia to listen in silence as she details her incredibly calculated political master plan, returning years later as a strong, rightful heir ready to reclaim her family's stolen glory, which is the perfect script to win over the masses and cement her ultimate authority. Eldmia Iga calls out her reckless plan, wondering why she didn't just hide with the royalists for safety, but Sir Ekaf chimes in, admitting they only knew her wild goals and not her actual location, prompting Revi to explain she needed those hardships to grow, even if our boy saved her anyway, leaving Eldmia Iga to offer a soft smile, just glad that she made it out alive and kicking. Meanwhile, their carriage rolls down a scenic path toward a massive, breathtaking white estate under the bright sun, where Sir Ekaf keeps a steady grip on the reins, announcing their arrival is just moments away. And soon enough, the carriage pulls up directly in front of the legendary knight's incredibly grand mansion. Revis excitedly looks out the window, while Eldmia is genuinely blown away by how nice the place is, until the red-haired girl casually asks how Cheryl is doing, making the veteran knight sweat a little bit, muttering that she is doing fine, just as a sharp leather boot steps forward to greet their arrival. A gloved hand aggressively grabs the carriage door handle, hinting at the chaos waiting outside. This door flies open to reveal Cheryl, who stands there radiating pure, unadulterated hostility. Her intense purple eyes lock onto their target, instantly narrowing with a terrifying amount of venom. She looms over our boy with an intimidating glare, leaving him sweating under the sudden pressure. Completely clueless about her identity, Eldmia Iga simply blinks and asks who she is. This casual response only infuriates Cheryl further, prompting her to scream his name in absolute rage. Revi quickly intervenes, forcing the angry swordswoman to politely bow and show some basic manners. Turning back to Eldmia, she fiercely demands a duel to avenge her father's supposedly ruined honor, leaving Sir Ekaf to facepalm in deep regret while our boy stares back with utter disbelief. Sir Ekaf desperately tries to lie his way out, though his nervous groans fool absolutely nobody. Eldmia Iga just shrugs it off, claiming a quick stretch is exactly what he needs after that long ride, cracking his knuckles with a smug grin as he happily accepts her sudden challenge. And soon, the two face off in the courtyard with their practice swords drawn, leaving a worried Revi to ask if they should stop this madness before someone gets hurt. But Sir Ekaf nervously sweats, admitting that absolutely nobody can stop his daughter once she gets going. Cheryl channels her intense focus, completely tuning out the world as she readies her blade, before launching herself forward with blinding speed to close the distance in a flash, their swords colliding in a massive shockwave of blue sparks as Eldmia barely blocks the strike, prompting the furious blonde to scream at him to crawl back to his country bumpkin village, while our boy barks back, pointing out her own father was the one who begged him to join. Eldmia and Cheryl clash swords in the courtyard, sparks flying as they test each other's strength, but our boy quickly realizes this furious noble girl is definitely not some pushover. Cheryl locks her intense purple eyes onto him, determined to analyze his every move, launching a swift horizontal slash that Eldmia barely manages to duck under in time, though it turns out this was all part of his calculated plan to bait her, predicting exactly where she will land as he prepares a lightning-fast counterattack. Unfortunately for him, Cheryl is way too sharp and instantly blocks his incoming strike, declaring victory with a smug grin as she prepares to deliver the final blow, only for Eldmia to pull off a brilliant deflection, completely shattering her momentum, sending her sword flying into the air while his blade stops perfectly at her throat. Cheryl's jaw completely drops as she stares in absolute disbelief at the sudden turn of events, wondering how on earth this country bumpkin managed to completely outmaneuver her lightning-fast strike, her intense purple eyes widening in sheer panic as she realizes she is completely defenseless. Eldmia casually holds his practice blade right at her throat while her own weapon clatters to the ground. Our boy looks completely bored, dryly asking if she is finally satisfied with this quick reality check, prompting the furious noble girl to scream in outrage, demanding they restart the duel immediately. But Eldmia calmly explains that he never intended to insult her legendary father in the first place, admitting he risked absolutely everything to come to the capital and train to become truly powerful, before flashing a warm, genuine grin and offering his hand to start their relationship on a better note. This proud swordswoman just stands there in stunned silence, staring blankly at his outstretched hand with a completely bewildered expression. Instead of accepting his friendly handshake, Cheryl aggressively slaps our boy's hand away, screaming that she gives him exactly 3 days before he runs back home crying, leaving Revi and Sir Ekaf to watch the bickering duo with amused smiles, prompting Eldmia to pump his fist and vow to become stronger than ever. Our boy immediately starts his brutal training regimen, grinding out push-ups on his bedroom floor, while Sir Ekhoff personally oversees his stance training in the quiet woods nearby, allowing Eldmia to unleash a powerful strike that completely shatters a heavy wooden dummy, before he moves on to dragging a massive boulder uphill under the scorching sun, collapsing onto his bed at the end of the day in absolute exhaustion, as the seasons slowly change outside his window to mark the passage of time. Eldmia Iga continues to clash swords with Cheryl under the autumn leaves, while Sir Ekaf closely supervises. Our boy pushes his body to the absolute limit, sweating bullets as he refines his swordsmanship. Soon enough, the autumn leaves fade away as winter snow blankets the branches outside his window. But the freezing cold cannot stop Eldmia from training shirtless in the middle of the woods, channeling his inner energy as he takes a deep breath amidst the falling snow. Eventually, the harsh winter melts away to reveal the bright green leaves of a fresh spring, finding our boy right back on his bedroom floor grinding out another round of push-ups, until Cheryl aggressively barges into his room without knocking to complain about his slow pace, warning him that all the best guild quests will be gone if they are late, prompting Eldmia Iga to flash a confident smirk as he wipes off his hard-earned sweat. Meanwhile, deep within a secluded forest, a quiet wooden cabin stands, bathed in the warm sunlight, where a greedy bandit happily counts his massive haul of stolen gold coins, boasting to his crew that their latest raid was an absolute jackpot, as the arrogant gang captain kicks his feet up and brags about the wealthy targets, prompting his loyal thugs to cheer in agreement as they plan their next move, laughing about how easily their victims beg for mercy and hand over their hard-earned cash. Unfortunately for them, a cloaked Cheryl is listening from the shadows with pure disgust, quietly stepping forward to put an end to their pathetic bragging session, before she suddenly flashes her blade and presses it directly against the captain's throat, leaving the terrified thug sweating bullets as he realizes his easy payday is officially over. This panicked thugs demand to know if the guild sent her, completely cornered in their own hideout, but Cheryl just screams back in rage, calling out to Eldmia Iga to help clear the room, prompting the terrified bandits to scramble for the exits as they realize they are completely outnumbered. Still, Cheryl grows incredibly impatient, silently urging her partner to hurry up and make his move. High above on the wooden rafters, the hooded blue-haired youth crouches silently with his sword drawn, leaving a clueless thug below to suddenly freeze as a terrifying chill runs down his spine. And before the bandit can even react, the agile warrior drops down with a lethal strike, sending the remaining crew into a total panic as they scream about the threat from above, unleashing a relentless flurry of steel that paints the wooden walls in deep crimson, while his glowing blue eyes lock onto his next target as the last few thugs curse his name. This blue-haired youth wastes no time, dropping down to strike a heavy blow against the massive thug, before spinning around to deliver a brutal kick that sends another bandit flying across the room, unleashing a swift slash that paints the wooden walls with a fresh coat of crimson, leaving the terrified gang captain to watch in horror as his entire crew is utterly decimated. With the rest of the bandits completely wiped out, the cabin falls into a tense silence. prompting the desperate leader to throw his hands up and beg frantically for his life, offering up all their stolen loot while Cheryl glares at him with absolute disgust. This blue-haired youth simply chuckles, dryly noting that trash like him is not even worth killing, explaining that he needs living prisoners to bring back to the guild as proof of success, which sounds like a relief, until the young warrior cracks his knuckles to deliver a brutal beating. This blue-haired youth delivers a final, brutal punch while mocking the defeated gang captain, sending a massive crash echoing through the quiet forest as the cabin doors rattle, and soon enough, the scene shifts to the bustling Adventurers Guild in the royal capital, where a cheerful receptionist happily hands over a heavy bag of gold as their reward, prompting the blue-haired youth to flash a confident grin while accepting the hard-earned cash. Still, Cheryl is already distracted, intensely scanning a new quest sheet for their next mission, explaining that their long break starts tomorrow and they need to check this out, leaving the young warrior to wonder if they are really hunting down more bandits. But Cheryl confidently explains this massive job requires 60 people for a vineyard out west, though he highly doubts Sir Ekef will ever let them go on such a dangerous trip. Sir Ekef flatly rejects Cheryl's reckless demands to join the guild, leaving her to threaten running away, while a mysterious cloaked observer watches her and the blue-haired youth from a high window above, peering down at the duo as they prepare for their next big guild assignment. Inside the office, the guildmaster confirms the young warrior's identity to his mysterious visitor, explaining that his brutal, merciless combat style earned him the terrifying nickname of the Mad Dog. This reputation clearly intrigues the cloaked visitor, who quietly acknowledges the rookie's formidable skills, narrowing their eyes with intense curiosity as they continue to study their target, unaware that the blue-haired youth is actually quite amused by his fierce new reputation. 2 days later, the duo arrives at a bustling vineyard camp on the capital's outskirts, prompting Cheryl to scan the crowd of rugged workers to find their mysterious new client. Eldmia spots their client, Baron Papiela, a grumpy noble who reportedly bought his title with cash, which immediately makes our boy highly suspicious of this wealthy countryside lord's true motives, before a loud, heavy-set coordinator steps up to explain the details of their upcoming raid, pointing toward a distant forest where 20 armed bandits are currently holed up inside an abandoned building. This plan is to have everyone line up in a single row and blindly charge the woods, a strategy so incredibly brainless that Eldmia can only stare in absolute disbelief, especially since they are expected to run across a massive, wide-open field with zero cover, prompting the other hired mercenaries to immediately lose their minds over this suicidal tactical disaster. Cheryl quietly whispers to Eldmia, who fully agrees that this entire setup smells like a massive trap, leaving them to glare at the smug Baron Papiela, who is clearly scheming something sinister. This heavy-set coordinator desperately waves his hands, trying to calm down the furious crowd of mercenaries, while Baron Papiela sits quietly on a nearby log, completely unbothered by their rising anger. Suddenly, the coordinator flashes a wide grin and points forward, announcing a special new proposal, offering a bonus of 5 silver coins to anyone brave enough to lead the charge, which instantly wins over the greedy mercenaries as they raise their weapons in absolute excitement. Behind his friendly facade, the coordinator lets slip an incredibly shady and sinister grin, but his smug expression completely vanishes when a calm voice suddenly interrupts his train of thought. This blue-haired youth casually steps forward with Cheryl, declaring they will be doing things their own way, flashing a confident smirk as he asks if there is any issue with them acting independently, leaving the panicked coordinator to sweat profusely while desperately trying to laugh off the sudden challenge. This heavy-set coordinator breaks into a cold sweat, desperately trying to maintain his fake cheerful smile. He glances back at Baron Papaela, who remains seated on a log with a cold, unbothered expression. This suspicious noble narrows his eyes, silently observing the duo with a calculating and deeply unsettling gaze. Forced to back down, the coordinator nervously laughs it off and lets them proceed on their own. But before he can even finish his sentence, the pair is already marching toward the woods. Cheryl asks Eldmia Iga if he also suspects that the brainless charge is a total setup, prompting our boy to agree while wondering what sinister goal the Baron is trying to achieve. Cheryl admits she has no idea what his endgame is, but warns of a grim outcome, predicting that every mercenary who blindly follows that foolish plan is going to end up dead, leaving the dense, silent forest ahead waiting to swallow up the unsuspecting army of greedy warriors. Deep inside the quiet forest, a group of bandit archers lies in wait to ambush their targets, gossiping about how the 2 rookie adventurers foolishly decided to split up from the main group, which makes the smug bandits believe they just hit an incredibly easy jackpot today, laughing as they fondly recall how their previous victims begged desperately for their lives, completely unaware that their arrogant bragging session is about to be cut brutally short. Suddenly, the blue-haired youth drops from the sky like a terrifying blue-eyed Grim Reaper, leaving the smug archer with barely enough time to register the sudden chill down his spine, before a single blinding slash paints the forest floor in a deep shade of crimson, prompting his panicked partner to turn around in absolute horror as his bow shakes violently, only to face the furious gaze of the young warrior charging in to finish the job. This blue-haired youth delivers a devastating punch straight to the bandit's face, sending blood spraying everywhere, following up with a brutal strike that slams the dazed archer directly into a nearby tree, cracking the thick bark as the defeated thug collapses with a painful groan. Hearing the commotion, the remaining bandits panic and scream about a sudden surprise attack, while the blue-haired youth casually shakes the fresh blood off his gloves without breaking a sweat before he instantly leaps back into the fray, raising his glowing blade for the next kill, unleashing a blinding blue slash that cuts down the sword-wielding thug in a single motion, leaving only one terrified archer left standing as the agile warrior closes the distance. This desperate sniper panics and curses his luck, frantically trying to line up a clean shot, but the young warrior effortlessly spins past the incoming arrow, completely unfazed by the pathetic attempt. This bandit archer screams in absolute shock as his arrow completely misses the target, before a brutal blinding slash tears through him and paints the forest floor crimson, prompting the remaining bandits to rally together and charge forward with their weapons raised, foolishly believing they can easily overwhelm the lone warrior by attacking him all at once. But the blue-haired youth just flashes a smug grin, completely unfazed by their desperate numbers. Later, he discusses the situation with Cheryl, suspecting the bandits are actually hired by the Baron, confidently claiming he has a brilliant plan to save the other greedy mercenaries as well, leaving Cheryl to stare back at him with a deeply skeptical and unamused expression. And as it turns out, his master strategy is not really a strategy at all, consisting entirely of him standing over a pile of freshly slaughtered thugs in the woods. This blue-haired youth smiles, confident that causing a massive scene will keep the Baron from sending more victims, before turning his attention back to the forest and wondering if Cheryl has uncovered any useful clues. He glances at the unconscious bandit slumped against a tree, deciding it is time to make his move. But first, he playfully pokes the dazed thug on the head to wake him up for questioning. This battered archer slowly opens his eyes with a painful groan, completely unaware of the nightmare ahead, only to find the young warrior looming over him with an incredibly unsettling, wide-eyed grin, prompting a swift slap that leaves the terrified bandit with a bloody nose and zero escape options. Meanwhile, Cheryl successfully tracks down the abandoned ruins of the bandit camp deep within the woods, searching the empty tents for any solid evidence that links these thugs directly to the Baron, until her sharp eyes suddenly lock onto a suspicious detail hidden right under her nose. Cheryl spots a small wooden storehouse standing suspiciously clean amidst the overgrown forest ruins. Opening the door, she discovers a dark, narrow staircase leading straight down into the earth. This hidden basement immediately raises red flags, as a simple storehouse has no business being here. She covers her nose in disgust as a foul, rotting stench wafts up from the darkness. Stepping onto the damp floor, her boot accidentally nudges something wet and sticky in the dark. A sudden wave of dread washes over her as she realizes what she just kicked. Staring down in absolute horror, she finds a pile of bloody bodies rotting away in the shadows. Meanwhile, back in the sunny woods, the interrogation continues with a very direct question. This battered bandit stammers out a terrifying answer, admitting they are actually collecting corpses, leaving the blue-haired youth stunned as the thug explains they are harvesting the bodies of fallen adventurers. Eldmia Iga grabs the trembling bandit by his collar, demanding to know why they are doing something so sick, confirming his worst suspicions that the corrupt Baron Papaella is indeed the mastermind behind this entire nightmare. But when he asks where the bodies are kept, the bandit reveals that powerful executives are guarding them, warning him that one of these elite guards can actually wield the devastating power of aura, which instantly triggers a wave of panic as he realizes Cheryl is walking straight into a deadly trap. Meanwhile, down in the dark basement, Cheryl picks up a blood-stained green-class adventurer's token from a corpse, realizing the Baron specifically targeted rookie adventurers to harvest their bodies under the guise of simple quests, completely unaware that a massive sword-wielding silhouette has just blocked her only exit at the top of the stairs, until her sharp instincts kick in, sensing a sudden murderous presence looming directly behind her, leaving her trapped in the dark with a pile of corpses as the enemy prepares to strike. Cheryl tenses up as she senses the terrifying presence of the elite guard looming right behind her, while the silent wooden storehouse stands as a grim tomb hidden deep within the quiet woods. Back at the sunny vineyard outskirts, the rest of the mercenary army prepares to move, completely unaware that they are actually marching straight into a carefully orchestrated slaughter. This heavy-set coordinator approaches Baron Papiella to confirm that all the preparations are finally complete, prompting the corrupt noble to smugly declare that they will personally eliminate any lucky survivors. But just as he gloats about his flawless plan being nearly complete, a panicked voice interrupts him. A terrified messenger rushes over to report a sudden emergency from the depths of the forest, leaving Baron Papiella sweating in absolute shock as he hears about the blue-haired youth's interference, grinding his teeth in pure rage as his perfect scheme begins to fall apart. Baron Papiella orders his sweating coordinator to put the remaining mercenaries on standby to buy them some time, before reaching down to grab his sword, demanding to be led straight to the troublemaker. This corrupt noble draws his blade in a fit of rage, swearing to personally slaughter the blue-haired pest, leaving the nervous coordinator behind, while a mysterious hooded stranger silently watches the angry lord depart. This cloaked observer narrows her eyes in the quiet vineyard, clearly plotting her own next move. While deep inside the dark basement, a blood-soaked blade remains buried in a fresh corpse. Cheryl stands ready in a defensive stance, surrounded by the gruesome remains of the fallen adventurers, as a massive bandit executive steps down the stairs, cursing the Baron's incompetence while brandishing a bloody cleaver, prompting our blonde warrior to quickly assess the threat, hoping to avoid a direct confrontation if possible. But she still tightens her grip on her hilt as a menacing dark energy begins to fill the room. Realizing she has no other option, Cheryl unleashes her glowing aura with a fierce smile, standing tall over the pile of corpses as the stunned bandit executive backs away, completely terrified by her sudden display of power as he desperately clutches his weapon. Before a massive blast completely shatters the storehouse and blows the roof right off, sending the screaming executive flying through the air and crashing onto the dirt path outside. Cheryl calmly steps out of the wreckage, demanding he spit out everything he knows, but the battered thug just laughs, mockingly pointing out that he brought plenty of backup. Right on cue, heavy footsteps echo through the quiet clearing as more enemies arrive, revealing a whole squad of armed bandits ready to tear our blonde warrior apart. Leaving Cheryl to grit her teeth, silently admitting that fighting them all alone is. Cheryl just flashes a smug grin, casually pointing out that she brought some backup of her own, right as the blue-haired youth drops from the sky like a relentless, blue-eyed storm, leaving the surrounding bandits completely paralyzed with fear as they realize they are next, before a single blinding slash tears through their ranks and paints the clearing crimson. This panicked executive screams at his remaining men to keep their guard up, only to suddenly lose track of the blonde warrior in the blink of an eye, staring in absolute confusion at the empty patch of dirt where she stood just seconds ago. Suddenly, Cheryl materializes right behind him with her glowing blade raised for a lethal strike, forcing the desperate thug to swing his weapon in a frantic bid to block her attack. But her overwhelming power shatters his blade and cleanly decapitates him in one swift motion. Blue-haired youth leaps from the sky, aiming his blade directly at another fleeing bandit, channeling his glowing blue energy as he descends like an absolute force of nature, landing a flawless strike that leaves yet another bloody thug face down on the dirt path. He pauses to wonder why none of these pathetic weaklings actually possessed any aura, right as Cheryl walks up to ask if he managed to uncover any useful secrets. She points toward the nearby wooden storehouse, explaining it is packed with harvested adventurer corpses, sighing in frustration because she accidentally slaughtered every single lead before getting any real answers. But the blue-haired youth reassures her, reminding her that his own captive is still breathing. Suddenly, a suspicious rustle in the nearby bushes catches their attention, cutting their conversation short, prompting our confident hero to flash a smug grin, ready to face whatever comes next. Suddenly, an elite guard plunges from above with a glowing pink blade, aiming to ambush the youth. But the blue-haired youth reacts in a split second, drawing his blade to counter the strike, their weapons colliding in a massive flash of energy that illuminates the entire forest clearing, sending the young warrior sliding back across the dirt path as he stabilizes his stance. He just flashes a smug grin, instantly recognizing the devastating aura behind that heavy blow, while the furious executive stands his ground, cursing the brats who dared to ruin their operation. His anger quickly turns to absolute horror as he finally takes a look around the clearing, realizing his entire squad of elite bandits has already been completely wiped out. This desperate executive clutches his head in pure agony, realizing his perfect plan is totally ruined, prompting the blue-haired youth to casually ask what they actually gained by slaughtering innocent adventurers. Baron Papiella lunges from above with his glowing pink blade, screaming at our hero to shut his mouth, but the blue-haired youth easily blocks the heavy blow, their swords clashing in a shower of sparks, prompting the corrupt noble to grin wickedly as he whispers a dark secret during their struggle. Our hero looks on in absolute disgust as the Baron explains his plan to burn the evidence, imagining himself basking in endless glory while sitting on a throne built of slaughtered rookie adventurers, boasting that he can easily hire more thugs to replace the ones they just wiped out. This sick confession infuriates the blue-haired youth, who cannot believe someone would murder for mere fame. And as his blue aura flares, the smug noble suddenly realizes he messed with the wrong warrior, before a single devastating slash completely shatters the Baron's blade and sends metal shards flying everywhere, leaving the defenseless noble to take a brutal bone-crushing kick straight to the chest. Baron Papiella coughs up a spray of fresh blood, completely overwhelmed by the brutal impact, before tumbling backward through the air and crashing violently onto the hard dirt path below, leaving the corrupt noble clutching his bleeding face in absolute shock at his sudden defeat. This blue-haired youth looms over him like an absolute god of war, his eyes glowing with power, telling the terrified noble to rejoice because his pathetic little reign of terror is finally over. He raises his glowing blade high, preparing to expose the Baron's horrific crimes to the entire world, prompting Baron Papella to desperately beg for mercy, claiming he was only following orders. Our hero just scoffs in disgust, completely refusing to buy into such a pathetic, desperate excuse, until the trembling noble suddenly screams out that he was blackmailed by actual demons, which leaves our hero completely frozen in shock as the Baron weeps about his deadly ultimatum. Cheryl's jaw drops as she overhears the noble's wild confession from the sidelines, while our blue-haired hero freezes in place, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, demanding to know if he actually just heard the word demons come out of his mouth. Baron Papiella desperately waves his hands, weeping that the monsters forced him to harvest those bodies, leaving Cheryl completely stunned as she processes the terrifying scale of this dark conspiracy. Our hero just scoffs, accusing the corrupt noble of spinning fairy tales to save his own neck, but before he can press any further, a mysterious cloaked assassin drops silently from the trees. This weeping baron begs for his life, offering to lead them straight to his demonic masters. Right as the hooded intruder lands gracefully between them, ready to silence the snitching noble, catching the blue-haired youth completely off guard as the rescue mission takes a chaotic turn. Before the corrupt noble can utter another word, a cold blade is pressed against his throat, and with one swift, merciless slash, the mysterious assassin completely silences the snitching baron, leaving the blue-haired youth standing in absolute shock as the lifeless body collapses before him. He can only stare in utter disbelief, completely blindsided by how fast his lead was eliminated, while the calm assassin casually wipes his bloody blade, mocking the deceased noble's weak resolve. This smug killer smiles warmly, casually addressing Eldmia Iga as if they were old friends, shifting the scene to a grand sunlit kingdom where dark secrets are kept hidden from the public, where Cheryl quietly contemplates the terrifying rumors surrounding the legendary group known as the King's Shadow, a ruthless intelligence organization that operates entirely in the dark with absolute control over information, consisting of deadly elite agents who will stop at nothing to protect the crown's ultimate interests. Cheryl tries to piece the puzzle together, wondering if her assumptions about this secret organization are correct, and Walter happily confirms her suspicions, introducing himself as a member of the legendary King's Shadow, sitting across from our duo inside a secure room to discuss their next move. Eldmia Iga isn't in the mood for pleasantries, demanding to know why the agent silenced their only lead, prompting Walter to offer a smooth apology while casually dodging the actual weight of the question. Our blue-haired hero snaps back, pointing out they lost a direct link to the literal demons pulling the strings. But the mysterious agent just keeps smiling, refusing to reveal what his organization is actually plotting. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing through the doorway cuts their tense standoff short, revealing a sharply dressed man with a monocle who promises to explain everything himself. Before introducing himself as Engrim, the wealthy master of this very adventurer's guild, Eldmia Iga narrows his eyes, immediately questioning how deeply the guildmaster is involved in this mess. Engrim offers a polite apology, thanking them for saving countless lives due to his guild's oversight, but as he takes a seat, his polite demeanor shifts into something far more serious, explaining that he cannot answer Eldmia's questions because the truth is too politically sensitive, which immediately triggers our hot-headed hero, while Cheryl surprisingly agrees with his angry outburst. This guildmaster simply smiles, preparing to drop a massive proposition to quiet their complaints, offering Eldma a secret job in exchange for all the classified information they desire, leaving our blue-haired hero highly skeptical as he cautiously asks what this job actually entails. And though the guildmaster refuses to share the exact details just yet, he reveals that the mission directly involves the terrifying forces of the Demon Lord's army. Hearing that combat is practically guaranteed, Cheryl demands confirmation about the literal demons pulling the strings, while Eldmia silently clenches his fist, realizing he is finally going to face his sworn enemies. This very same monsters who destroyed his past and left him with nothing but burning rage, fueling his absolute determination to hunt down every last one of those horned beasts. Walter watches our hero's intense reaction, looking completely exhausted by the sheer weight of this mission, prompting Eldmia to instantly accept the job, much to the relief of the smiling guildmaster. This mysterious agent immediately prepares to leave, telling Eldmia to follow him to a more secure location, which gets Cheryl pumped up and ready to join the fight against the demonic forces. But Engrim quickly shuts her down, politely explaining that she is strictly forbidden from tagging along. Turns out her father is the legendary king's third sword, and the guildmaster cannot risk her getting killed. Cheryl can only sigh in frustration, knowing her involvement would cause massive political headaches, so she calls out to Eldmia as he prepares to depart with the mysterious agent, warning our hot-headed hero not to pull any of his usual reckless stunts. But Eldmia just flashes a confident grin and waves her off like it is nothing, leaving the blonde warrior staring after him with a deeply uneasy feeling in her chest. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a quiet graveyard bathed in the warm glow of sunset, where a fresh bouquet of white flowers rests peacefully on a stone grave marker, as Walter explains that the recent surge in bandit attacks was actually orchestrated by outsiders, revealing that those pathetic thugs were merely disposable pawns meant to distract the kingdom's forces, and the real threat is a group of actual demons currently infiltrating the royal capital. This mastermind is treating the bandits like mere puppets to distract the entire kingdom, prompting Eldmia to ask why they do not just send in the royal army instead. But Walter explains they need an absolute powerhouse who can operate completely off the radar, giving our hero a license to kill if capturing these demonic infiltrators alive proves impossible. This mysterious agent hands over a small slip of paper containing his next destination, which catches Eldmia off guard when he realizes he is actually getting some backup, since fighting literal demons completely solo is a great way to get himself killed, and Walter promises that these hand-picked allies are more than capable of holding their own. Shifting to the quiet streets of the capital, as night begins to fall over the kingdom, our blue-haired hero arrives at the designated building to finally meet his new squad. Pulling his hood up to blend in, Eldmia reminds himself to stay sharp near the demon hideout, as he pushes open the heavy wooden door of the designated tavern to find his new squad, only to find a bustling room packed with rowdy adventurers drinking and laughing at every table, leaving our blue-haired hero scanning the noisy room to spot his hand-picked allies in the crowd, until his eyes suddenly lock onto something so incredibly ridiculous that he completely freezes in his tracks. box. Hanging right across the back wall is a massive, colorful banner warmly welcoming him by name, completely blowing his secret cover thanks to a buff red-haired woman and her bizarrely festive welcoming committee. Leaving our stealthy hero questioning his life choices as his supposedly elite backup ruins his undercover mission, while the muscular red-haired warrior pauses mid-chug, her eyes locking onto the hooded newcomer with sudden recognition, before she loudly shouts his name across the entire tavern, waving him over to join their table. Eldmia curses the smiling guildmaster, absolutely convinced the man must be completely blind, as he sits down at the tavern table to size up his new squad, only to realize the buff red-haired warrior doesn't even remember who hired them, prompting our hero to point in disbelief, reminding her that Engrim is literally their boss. But she just laughs it off, completely unbothered by the threat of demonic infiltrators, forcing Eldmia to desperately beg her to keep her loud voice down before they get caught. He can only grind his teeth in frustration, silently reminding himself this isn't a game, until the muscular warrior raises her wooden mug to introduce herself as Ekaterina, followed by a tiny hooded mage named Lili, who can barely whisper her own name, leaving Eldmia to wonder if this trembling girl has ever actually survived a real battle. Eldmia tries to introduce himself, but the bearded dwarf at the table is too busy drawing to care, focusing entirely on his paper with an intense stare that completely shuts out the rest of the world, leaving our blue-haired hero twitching in pure frustration as his presence is completely and utterly ignored. Fortunately, Ekaterina laughs it off and introduces the silent artist as Jin, a quirky dwarf who loves sketching, prompting Eldmia to realize his dream team is actually just a collection of highly dysfunctional weirdos, especially when the red-haired warrior immediately orders another round while the tiny mage cowers in her hood. Trying to salvage some dignity, our hero tears down the ridiculous welcoming banner with a forced, painful smile, but Ekaterina just grins, admitting she is thrilled to finally work with the legendary Mad Dog. She explains that the nickname comes from his wild combat style, comparing him to an unleashed hound, and Eldmia can only sigh, deeply disappointed that his first official title is so incredibly uncool. Eldmia Iga suddenly turns around as a loud commotion breaks out behind him in the tavern, where a rowdy customer is aggressively pointing his finger and picking a fight with the bartender, who flatly demands the angry drunk pay his tab for everything he consumed tonight, prompting the flushed patron to point threateningly, swearing the man will deeply regret this insult, before loudly boasting that everyone in this tavern will soon become his obedient servants anyway. Eldmia narrows his eyes at the bizarre threat, immediately sensing something incredibly off about the man. Fortunately, a companion quickly muzzles the drunk and hands over a heavy coin pouch to settle things, dragging his loud friend out the door while the rest of the tavern watches them depart. Ekaterina leans over the table, asking our blue-haired hero if he caught that highly suspicious slip-up, while their tiny hooded mage nervously wonders if those men are actually working with the demon army. Ekaterina cracks her knuckles with a savage grin, eager to beat some answers out of their targets. But Eldmia Iga immediately shuts her down, pointing out that a loud brawl will only alert the demons, prompting the muscular warrior to playfully mock his cautious nature while dragging him into a suffocating headlock. Meanwhile, the suspicious patrons quietly slip out of the tavern and head straight into the dark forest, unaware that our dysfunctional squad is already creeping through the bushes right behind them. Lili nervously whispers to Eldmia, wondering if they should risk following their targets deeper into the unfamiliar woods. Instead of launching a reckless chase, our clever hero decides to summon a glowing tracking spell, leaving the tiny hooded mage staring in absolute awe at his unexpected mastery of magic, as a beautiful glowing blue butterfly gently flutters right above his open palms. With a soft breath, Eldmia sends his glowing scout to silently tail the unsuspecting lantern bearer. Eldmia Iga decides to keep their distance, quietly following the glowing butterfly through the dark woods. Lely looks completely stunned by his high-level magic, whispering in disbelief when he mentions his elven master. Brushing off her shock, our blue-haired hero urges her to focus on the tracking mission instead, as the glowing butterfly guides them straight to a group of suspicious men entering a rocky cave. Eldmia Iga crouches low in the bushes, narrowing his eyes as he observes their secret hideout, realizing this seemingly abandoned dungeon is actually crawling with highly active and dangerous enemy forces. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoes from the shadows, coldly welcoming the late arrivals to the meeting, sending a jolt of pure shock straight through our hero as he recognizes that sinister tone, revealing a sinister individual with light blue hair and two massive dark horns protruding from their head, instantly triggering Eldmia's burning hatred as he stares directly at his sworn enemy, a literal demon. Enkantoru stands tall, coldly lecturing his subordinates about the absolute necessity of punctuality during their operations. Eldmia Ega watches from the shadows, his heart hammering as he confirms his worst fears. This horned demon continues his lecture, demanding to know why they couldn't keep a simple promise. While most of the thugs immediately bow and apologize, one arrogant idiot decides to speak up, casually gesturing as he complains that they deserve a pass for being just a little late, boldly claiming that the demon only has a foothold in this kingdom thanks to their efforts. This demon merely stares back with a chillingly calm expression, quietly digesting the man's absolute disrespect, before suddenly lunging forward and clamping his hand over the loudmouth's face in a vice grip, squeezing with terrifying strength as his veins bulge, giving the thug zero time to even scream, and with a sickening pop, he completely obliterates the man's head in a massive spray of blood. This remaining thugs stand completely frozen in sheer terror, clutching their mouths after witnessing the brutal execution, while Eldmia and his new squad watch from the bushes, their previous playful banter instantly evaporating. Enkantoru coldly looks down at the headless corpse, dismissing the dead man as a complete fool, before ordering the terrified survivors to quickly clean up the mess and return to their duties. This horned monster promises them grand rewards once the demons inevitably conquer the entire kingdom, prompting the Sneakies to salute in absolute panic before scrambling back to their posts, which only makes Ekaterina grin, eagerly asking Eldmia if he is ready to crush this psycho. However, she quickly notices our hero standing completely still, his back turned in ominous silence, as Eldmia flashes a dark, chilling smile, whispering that he has not forgotten their cruelty, clutching his chest as he vows to make them pay for everything they stole from him. Eldmia flashes a terrifyingly dark grin, absolutely thrilled to finally corner his sworn demonic enemies, while the remaining thugs nervously carry their headless comrade's body back into the dark cave entrance, leaving our dysfunctional squad watching from the bushes as the horned demon prepares to depart. But Ekaterina immediately ruins the stealth approach by leaping up and urging everyone to charge, forcing Eldmia to desperately grab her back before she completely blows their cover. Unfortunately, the sudden rustling in the bushes instantly catches the sharp ears of the horned monster, who slowly turns his head with a cold, suspicious glare toward the nearby foliage, prompting our panicked hero to clamp his hand over the loud warrior's mouth in absolute terror, as the heavy footsteps of the demon begin marching directly toward their flimsy hiding spot, and our hero can only sweat bullets as their stealth mission completely falls apart. Enkantoru suddenly whips around, unleashing a blinding pink energy slashed directly toward the rustling bushes. This devastating shockwave tears through the foliage, completely obliterating the greenery in a single terrifying sweep. Fortunately, the demon only finds a lingering trace of magic floating gently above his empty hand. Muttering that it must have just been his imagination, the horned monster finally turns back around. Meanwhile, our hidden squad collapses in a quiet clearing nearby, desperately catching their collective breath. Instead of staying quiet, Ekaterina just laughs, completely oblivious to how close they came to dying, prompting an absolutely furious Eldmia to snap, demanding to know what is wrong with her head. Ekaterina tries to play it cool, reminding him that their ultimate goal is still to fight, but Eldmia yells back, pointing out they have absolutely zero intel on the enemy's actual combat strength, before coldly telling her to go home if she cannot take this life or death mission seriously. Eldmia turns his glare toward Jin and Lily, telling them to leave if they aren't fully committed, as he turns his back on the group, determined to hunt down the demons no matter the cost, his eyes burning with rage as he vows to uncover the secrets of the Demon Lord's army. Declaring he can handle this mission alone, our stubborn hero walks off into the dark woods, leaving his dysfunctional squad behind to lazily wonder how they managed to mess things up so quickly. Under the bright full moon, our lone hero stands atop a massive cliff overlooking the enemy territory, crouching low to scout the area while keeping his hood up to blend into the shadows, where a single guard stands watch outside the dark cave entrance, completely unaware of the threat above. But as Eldmia plans his stealthy infiltration, a heavy boot suddenly steps up right behind him, prompting our hero to break out in a cold sweat as a finger gently taps his shoulder. Eldmia whips around in surprise, only to find Jin standing there holding a rolled-up scroll, taking the parchment with a puzzled expression as he wonders what this could possibly be, only to realize it is an incredibly detailed hand-drawn map of the entire enemy dungeon. Lily quietly chimes in from the shadows, revealing that their silent dwarf companion drew it himself, explaining that Jin researched the entire region's geography the moment they received the mission. Our blue-haired hero flashes back to the tavern, realizing the dwarf wasn't just ignoring him earlier, prompting Eldmia to offer a sincere thank you, which Jin happily accepts with a thumbs up. Suddenly, Ekaterina calls out to him, her usual boisterous attitude replaced by a surprisingly sheepish look, as she sincerely apologizes for her reckless behavior, admitting she simply got way too carried away, and Eldmia can only sigh in relief, quietly accepting her apology since they managed to escape undetected. Ekaterina explains that she won't pry into his past, especially since it involves their common demonic enemies, while Jin and Lily look on with absolute determination, proving they are fully committed to this dangerous raid, prompting the muscular warrior to extend her hand, offering a true partnership to the legendary Mad Dog, which makes Eldmia feel incredibly foolish for letting his burning rage get the better of his judgment, realizing that going solo against an entire demonic army is a quick way to get himself killed. So he takes a deep breath, letting his anger cool down as he looks back at his teammates, firmly grasping Ekaterina's hand to seal their alliance while the rest of the squad celebrates their reunion, promising to make up for his childish outburst by leading them to a flawless victory during the raid, before flashing a confident smirk as he prepares to draw up a brilliant strategy with his team. Meanwhile, the unsuspecting blue-haired youth stands guard outside the dark cave, completely oblivious to the incoming storm. Standing guard outside the dark cave, the blue-haired youth yawns loudly while complaining about how sleepy he is. But his lazy shift is abruptly cut short when a sudden noise nearby catches his attention. Whipping his head around only to spot a massive shadow stepping directly into his line of sight, revealing Ekaterina wearing a terrifyingly savage grin as she prepares to unleash absolute chaos with her hammer. Moments earlier, the squad lays out Jin's highly detailed map to run a final strategy check, where Eldmia Iga points out the most suspicious room located at the very back of the dungeon, proposing that he will act as the decoy to draw the enemies out while the others slip inside. But Ekaterina immediately shuts him down, confidently volunteering to take the dangerous decoy role for herself, flashing a wicked, toothy grin as she points out that a loud distraction is her absolute specialty, before proudly hoisting her massive hammer, eager to go completely wild and smash some demonic skulls. This unsuspecting guard whips around in sheer panic as a booming voice suddenly calls him out, revealing Ekaterina standing tall with her massive hammer, daring every single traitor to face her, before she leaps high into the air, bringing her heavy weapon crashing down on him, unleashing a devastating shockwave that completely obliterates the ground in a massive cloud of dust. With the guard easily knocked out, the muscular warrior proudly stands before the dark cave entrance, laughing hysterically as she wonders if her grand entrance was just a tiny bit too loud, before urging Eldmia Iga to make his move while she keeps the enemy forces distracted, prompting our blue-haired hero to offer a quick word of thanks as he readies his gear. And with their distraction successfully set, the rest of the squad charges straight into the dungeon. Inside, the dark and ominous corridors loom ahead, filled with ancient pillars and lurking dangers. Deep inside the dungeon, Enkantoru stands in silence as a sudden commotion echoes from the entrance, before a panicked lackey bursts into the chamber to report that someone is wreaking absolute havoc. But instead of organizing a defense, the ruthless demon lord instantly whips around with lethal intent, brutally slicing the messenger in half with a single effortless wave of his dark energy, cold-bloodedly muttering that he already knows about the intrusion and doesn't tolerate useless panic, leaving the dead informant in a pool of blood while dismissing the human traitors as completely pathetic. Another hooded cultist nervously steps forward, suggesting they should abandon the base before reinforcements arrive. Yet Enkantoro flatly refuses to run, declaring their ultimate victory is already guaranteed, ordering his trembling subordinate to ignore the loud invaders and focus entirely on their dark work, as he takes a heavy step forward to personally deal with the incoming threat. Enkantoru charges forward with dark pink magic crackling in his hand, determined to handle the intruders himself. Meanwhile, the panicked guards scramble through the corridors, desperate to stop the invasion at any cost. Believing they are only dealing with a single loud intruder, the thugs completely miss Eldmia Iga hiding nearby. Our blue-haired hero watches them pass, noting that the entire defense force is successfully focused on the entrance. He quickly signals Jin and Lily to slip through the back routes while the coast is clear. But as they prepare to move, Eldmia suddenly notices something off and freezes in his tracks. Turning around, he finds their hooded companion Lily trembling violently from head to toe in sheer terror. She clutches her wooden staff with white knuckles, completely overwhelmed by the suffocating demonic pressure in the air. When Eldmia gently calls out her name, she snaps back to reality with a startled gasp, prompting our hero to ask if she can handle this, while she nervously apologizes for her anxiety. Lily looks down in shame, admitting she can't stop shaking now that they are actually here, while Eldmia Iga watches her in silence, processing her sudden confession with a calm expression, before gently reassuring her that there is absolutely nothing wrong with feeling terrified right now. Admitting his own heart is beating wildly out of his chest at the thought of fighting demons, but he chooses to ignore the fear and focus entirely on completing their dangerous mission. He urges her to remember her own reasons for coming this far so they can push through together, which instantly restores Lizzie's resolve as she clutches her staff and vows to do her absolute best, prompting the squad to sprint down the corridor as they close in on the main chamber, while a massive echoing crash reverberates through the entire dungeon from the entrance, where Ekaterina is busy having the absolute time of her life smashing guards with her giant hammer. Ekaterina launches a guard high into the air with a single devastating swing of her massive hammer, leaving the poor guy to crash face first onto the dirt road with a painful groan, while his terrified comrade can only shout curses as he realizes they are completely outmatched, prompting the muscular warrior to charge forward with her eyes glowing in absolute battle fury, before she delivers another earth-shattering slam that completely obliterates the remaining resistance in a flash. With the entire guard squad now snoring peacefully on the forest floor, Ekaterina stands victorious, wiping her chin with a cocky smirk while complaining about the lack of a real challenge. But her celebration is cut short when a pair of glowing pink eyes locks onto her, as Enkantoro ambushes her from above, clashing his magic-infused blade directly against her heavy hammer, forcing the red-haired warrior to slide backward as she braces for a brutal fight. Ekaterina grins wildly as she welcomes the demon lord, completely unfazed by his sudden appearance. Enkantoro stands tall in the forest clearing, his eyes glowing with a terrifying pink aura. But instead of attacking immediately, the demon lord silently analyzes the situation with cold precision, realizing that this loud warrior is only fighting to keep his attention away from the entrance, which means the rest of the squad has already slipped deep inside his hidden dungeon. demon. Mocking their strategy as a decent effort, the demon lord prepares to end this distraction quickly, summoning a surge of dark pink magic into his palm to wipe her out instantly. Despite the overwhelming pressure, Ekaterina braces herself and dares the monster to give it his best shot. While deep inside the stone corridors, Eldmia Iga leads his companions toward their final destination. Sprinting around the final corner as a blinding light reveals the main chamber just ahead, Eldmia Iga and his squad finally burst into the main chamber, only to freeze in absolute shock as they look down to find a group of hooded cultists operating a massive glowing pink portal, prompting one of the horned cultists to whip his head around in sheer panic as they're spotted. While Eldmia immediately locks eyes with the demon, realizing this is the source of all their troubles, as the swirling vortex of pink energy hums with enough power to transport an entire army, leaving our blue-haired hero to wonder if they are planning a full-scale invasion or smuggling something priceless. But realizing he doesn't have time to overthink, Eldmia pushes off the ledge with a heavy stomp, diving headfirst into the chamber with his sword drawn to crash their little magical party, which sends the horned cultist into a cursing fit as his precious operation is suddenly threatened, prompting the desperate demon to summon a glowing red magic circle to blast our hero away. A massive red magic circle flares to life on the floor, crackling with hostile energy, catching Eldmia Ega completely off guard as he hovers directly above the trap, leaving our blue-haired hero to grit his teeth in sheer frustration at his own carelessness, before a violent pillar of flame erupts from the circle, completely swallowing him whole. This horned cultist cackles in triumph, absolutely convinced he just turned the intruder into ash, launching a deadly crystal spear straight through the smoke to finish the job, only for a swirling elemental barrier to manifest instantly, deflecting the lethal projectile away, which leaves the smug demon sweating bullets as he wonders who casts such high-level magic, revealing Lily standing tall with her glowing staff, urging her leader to keep moving forward. With his path cleared, Eldmia dives through the air to strike down the panicked cultist. This panicked cultist desperately unleashes a wave of purple magic to protect himself, but Eldmia Iga crashes down with his sword, slamming directly into the glowing defensive shield, sparks flying as the blade grinds against the magical barrier in a high-stakes struggle, leaving our blue-haired hero annoyed that even the low-level grunts have decent defensive spells, until a second hooded cultist steps up, smugly bragging about their superior numbers while conjuring a fireball. This new challenger thrusts the blazing projectile forward, aiming to incinerate Eldmia from his blind spot, only for Jin to burst straight through the stone floor with a surprise pickaxe ambush, catching the arrogant mage completely off guard as his smug expression instantly melts into pure terror, realizing too late that the squad's dwarf companion literally dug his way into the fight, before Jin delivers a brutal downward swing that sends the spellcaster crashing into the dirt. This hooded cultist panics behind his barrier, completely shocked that his defensive spell is failing, while Eldmia Ega locks his gaze onto the target with cold, unwavering determination, channeling a massive surge of blue elemental energy directly into his glowing blade, before bringing the weapon down to shatter the magical barrier into a million pieces, catching the cultist completely off guard as the devastating strike breaks through his defenses, sending a brutal spray of blood across the screaming mage's face in an instant, followed by a heavy direct blow that completely crushes the cultist's nose, slamming the helpless traitor hard onto the stone floor with absolute overwhelming force. Our blue-haired hero immediately grabs the dazed cultist tightly by the collar, demanding to know their true purpose behind creating this massive glowing magic gate. This bleeding cultist just sneers, mockingly asking why he would ever share secrets with a mere human, prompting Eldmia Iga to grit his teeth in sheer rage at the demon's stubborn arrogance, while Lily nervously points out that they arrived just in the nick of time to stop them, staring in horror at the massive swirling pink portal that is already hovering on the verge of completion. Our blue-haired hero immediately readies his sword, determined to shatter the magical gateway right then and there, but Lily quickly panics and screams at him to stop, warning that destroying it is suicide, explaining that a dimensional gate of this scale holds an absolutely absurd amount of highly unstable mana, meaning any sudden disruption would trigger a catastrophic explosion, vaporizing the entire dungeon and everyone inside. Eldmia grinds his teeth in bitter frustration, realizing his easiest option is completely off the table, before he violently slams his heavy blade right next to the terrified cultist's face to force answers. Eldmia Ega pins the cultist down, demanding to know how to safely dismantle the massive portal, but the bleeding cultist just chuckles mockingly, completely amused by our hero's desperate interrogation, before spitting a mouthful of blood directly onto Eldmia's face in a final act of defiance, as he sneers that a lowly human will never get any useful secrets out of him. While Lily watches in horror, the arrogant cultist boasts that their ultimate victory is already guaranteed, prompting Eldmia to slowly wipe the blood from his eyes as his patience completely evaporates. As the smug cultist continues to laugh, convinced there is absolutely nothing they can do, until our blue-haired hero winds up a devastating punch, channeling pure rage into his fist, delivering a brutal, bone-shattering strike that instantly shuts the loudmouth up for good, demanding once again that he spill the beans before things get even uglier. Eldmia Iga continues to pummel the cultist, demanding answers with every single bloody strike, while Lily watches in stunned silence, completely horrified by her leader's sudden descent into pure rage. As the bound demon sneers while Jin looks on with growing concern for his friend's sanity, screaming at the top of his lungs to know why they had to build that portal, as traumatic memories of his ruined childhood home and slaughtered family flash before his eyes, demanding a real answer as his vision blurs with tears and the blood of his enemy. But just as he prepares to deliver another devastating blow, a strong hand grabs his wrist, catching Eldmia completely off guard as he whips his head around to see who stopped him, only to find Jin staring back with a solemn expression, silently pleading with him to stop, leaving our blue-haired hero to slowly snap out of his rage as reality finally sinks in. Eldmia Iga stands frozen over the beaten cultist, slowly snapping out of his blind rage, as he grits his teeth in bitter regret, realizing he completely lost control of himself. But their tense silence is suddenly shattered by an echoing, mocking voice from the shadows, prompting Eldmia and his companions to whip their heads toward the dark corridor in panic, where slow, heavy footsteps approach as a defeated warrior lies motionless on the cold stone floor, leaving Lily to stare in absolute horror as the terrifying truth begins to dawn on her, as a cruel hand ruthlessly drags their defeated red-haired companion by her long hair, catching Eldmia completely off guard as he recognizes the battered form of his strong ally, his mind racing in sheer disbelief at how easily their powerhouse was taken down, especially since she had confidently promised to handle her side of the mission alone. Flashback reveals Eldmia Iga warning his red-haired ally to retreat if things get too dangerous, but the confident warrior just laughed it off, promising to wrap things up quickly, only to end up completely defeated and dragged by her hair like a trophy. This demon lord sneers at her weakness, mocking the group's pathetic attempt to stop him, prompting an enraged Eldmia to leap from the ledge with his sword drawn, screaming in absolute fury as he demands to know what the monster did to his friend. Instead of answering, Enkantoru casually lifts the unconscious warrior to use her as a shield, forcing our blue-haired hero to freeze mid-air as panic completely takes over, before the ruthless demon hurls her limp body straight at him like a projectile, leaving Eldmia to catch his battered ally as they both crash hard onto the stone floor. Eldmia catches his battered ally mid-air, bracing himself as they both plummet toward the ground, screaming her name in a desperate panic while her limp body remains completely unresponsive. But his worry is instantly cut short as his combat instincts warn him of an incoming threat, as Enkantoru closes the distance in a flash, winding up a magic-infused fist to strike him down. This brutal punch connects directly with Eldmia's cheek, sending a shockwave of raw force through his skull, blasting our blue-haired hero backward until he violently crashes straight into a solid stone pillar, leaving the smug demon lord to pause in genuine shock as the dust begins to settle, revealing Eldmia still standing tall on his feet, safely cradling his unconscious friend in his arms, his face battered and bleeding, but his eyes burning with an even fiercer desire for payback. Even Enkantoro has to admit he's highly impressed by the kid's absurd level of durability. Eldmia cradles his unconscious ally, leaving Enkantoro completely baffled by how the kid survived his brutal punch. This demon lord stares at his own hand, sensing a bizarre, overwhelming pressure he didn't feel before, realizing with a sudden jolt of panic that this human's power is actively growing by the second. But before he can process this threat, a heavy pickaxe suddenly swings down toward his head, prompting the agile demon to execute a lightning-fast backhand swipe infused with sharp purple energy, which instantly shatters the incoming tool and sends the broken pieces flying across the chamber. Enkantoru scoffs in sheer disbelief, wondering why anyone would bring a literal mining tool to a boss fight, only for a massive golden magic circle to erupt behind him, unleashing a devastating wave of holy light, slamming directly into his back with enough explosive force to completely shatter his smug composure, leaving the arrogant demon lord wide-eyed in absolute shock as the surprise attack actually connects. Lily stands her ground, channeling her remaining mana into a series of glowing golden magic circles, screaming in absolute defiance as she prepares to unleash everything she has left on the demon, sending a barrage of devastating light beams raining down directly toward the startled Enkantoru, who merely clicks his tongue in annoyance, completely unfazed by her high-level magical assault, easily dodging the explosive blasts as he weaves through the battlefield with terrifying speed. This demon lord immediately targets Lily, rushing forward to eliminate the annoying mage first, but instead of panicking, she simply smirks as if everything is going exactly to plan. Enkantoru suddenly freezes mid-stride, his smug expression instantly melting into pure confusion as he senses a trap, right before a massive hand bursts violently through the solid stone floor beneath him, as Walter grabs the shocked demon lord tightly by the ankle to completely halt his deadly charge. Jin grins triumphantly as he holds onto the demon lord's leg with absolute crushing force, leaving Enkantoro completely anchored to the spot while the ground crumbles beneath his feet, as the arrogant demon lord realizes he fell right into their carefully planned trap, giving Lily the perfect opening to charge up her most devastating spell from behind, screaming at the top of her lungs as she unleashes a torrent of pure golden energy, sending a massive pillar of holy light crashing directly toward her target with explosive power, which blasts the shocked demon lord backward, sending him flying through a shower of shattered stone. Yet the monster quickly recovers, sliding across the floor to regain his footing with terrifying ease. only to look up in sudden alarm as a shadow looms directly over him, revealing Eldmia Ega diving from above to deliver a devastating downward slash with his glowing blade. Enkantoro casually catches the glowing blade with his bare hand, channeling his dark purple energy, leaving Eldmia Ega to grit his teeth in frustration as the demon lord smirks back mockingly. But our blue-haired hero refuses to back down, pushing his sword forward with everything he has. Sparks fly as the two engage in a blinding clash of steel and raw magical power, prompting Enkantoro to throw a devastating purple-infused punch to shatter his opponent's momentum, which Eldmia barely manages to block with his blade, feeling the bone-rattling force of the impact. Before the relentless demon lord immediately presses the advantage, lunging forward with glowing eyes, only for a massive blinding beam of golden holy magic to suddenly rain down from above, catching the arrogant demon completely off guard as the explosive light engulfs his entire body, leaving Enkantoro to realize with absolute horror that he completely underestimated the party's backline support. Lely stands exhausted, holding her staff as Enkantoro bitterly regrets not taking out the annoying mage first. But Eldmia Ega refuses to give him a moment to breathe, screaming as he lunges forward, delivering a lightning-fast slash that cuts clean across the distracted demon lord's chest, drawing a satisfying spray of dark blood as the arrogant monster finally takes some real damage. Pressing the advantage immediately, our blue-haired hero drives his glowing blade forward for a finishing blow, plunging the steel deep into his opponent's shoulder while celebrating what seems like an easy victory. Except Eldmia's triumphant grin instantly vanishes as a sudden wave of dread washes over him. Realizing his blade is completely stuck, barely scratching the demon's absurdly dense, magic-reinforced muscles, leaving Enkantoro to flash a terrifying, blood-soaked grin while mocking the kingdom's desperate struggle, before effortlessly shattering the steel blade with his bare hand to show his true, terrifying power. Enkantoro channels a massive surge of dark purple energy directly into his clenched fist, as the demon lord unleashes his full terrifying power to wipe out the entire party, leaving Eldmia Ega to stand frozen under the crushing weight of this overwhelming aura, while the monstrous boss promises to slaughter every last one of them without mercy, triggering a sudden flashback to a straw dummy getting absolutely shredded by rapid slashes, where a younger Eldmia Ega is seen pushing his physical limits during intense solo training, until a sharp voice suddenly interrupts his focus and makes him look back in surprise, revealing Cheryl standing nearby to scold the young warrior for his highly reckless training methods, pointing out that he is merely burning through raw magic instead of refining it into aura, comparing his unrefined energy to boiling, molten metal that still needs to be properly forged. Cheryl explains that aura solidifies volatile energy like steel, coating a warrior's body and weapon for defense, while mana draws in surrounding elements to materialize the user's will into active magical spells, warning the young Eldmia Ega that his reckless method is like wrapping himself in boiling iron. But she completely freezes in absolute shock when the kid casually reveals he's done this for years, leaving our blue-haired hero to grin excitedly, thinking that wrapping himself in molten iron sounds incredibly badass, as Cheryl just stares at him in stunned silence, prompting him to tilt his head in confusion. Internally, she panics over how a human could survive this, since only two specific races wield raw magic, which only makes Eldmia more curious as he eagerly asks what other races can pull off this feat, sending a cold sweat down her face as she realizes the terrifying implications of his bizarre biology, before she quickly pats his head and dodges the question, leaving him complaining about being left hanging. Eldmia Ega snaps out of his memory as his mentor's warning echoes in his mind, recalling Cheryl's final words about the true nature of the power he is chasing. But the terrifying reality of the present instantly crashes back as Enkantoro looms over him, leaving our blue-haired hero to sweat in panic as he recognizes the demon's raw magic, while the monstrous boss winds up a devastating punch infused with pure purple energy. Our boy barely manages to react, clutching his shattered sword as the pressure pushes him back, his eyes widening in absolute terror as he realizes he cannot dodge the incoming strike, before Enkantoro unleashes a brutal magic-infused fist directly toward the young warrior's face, following up with a savage kick that slams Eldmia headfirst into the cold stone floor, sending our battered hero flying across the chamber like a ragdoll from the sheer impact. Eldmia Ega is sent flying through the air, screaming in agony from the demon's brutal strike, coughing up blood as he desperately tries to process the sheer gap in their power, before crashing heavily onto the cold stone floor, completely immobilized and out of commission. Lily screams his name in absolute terror, her heart sinking as she watches her ally fall. But she has no time to mourn as Enkantoro slowly turns his menacing gaze toward her. This ruthless demon lord channels a massive surge of dark purple energy into his bare hand, lunging forward with terrifying speed to eliminate the party's last standing support once and for all, prompting the panicked mage to quickly raise her staff and deploy a glowing mana barrier, which instantly shatters like cheap glass under the weight of his overwhelming magical force, sending Lily flying backward through the air as blood splatters across the ruined chamber. Enkantoro dives down to finish off the fallen Lily with a magic-infused fist, but the demon lord suddenly pauses as a massive spike of energy catches him off guard, with Walter leaping in to block the deadly blow, taking the full force of the impact. Sliding backward across the stone floor, Enkantoro quickly regains his footing with a frustrated scowl, completely baffled by how these stubborn humans keep finding the strength to stand up, though his irritation quickly turns into pure amusement as he prepares to end this farce, only for Walter to ambush him from behind, swinging his trusty pickaxe with absolute desperation, pouring every single ounce of his remaining strength into this one final reckless gamble, which only earns him a mocking, bloodthirsty grin from the completely unfazed Demon Lord, who effortlessly counters with a brutal kick that sends the brave dwarf crashing into the wall. Walter crashes hard into the stone pillar, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and debris, leaving the entire party completely wiped out on the floor while Enkantoro stands victorious in the center. Our battered hero struggles to push himself up, utterly baffled by the demon's absurd jump in power. Meanwhile, the Demon Lord turns his attention to his trembling subordinate, sparking a surge of purple magic, ordering the terrified lackey to immediately focus on completing the dimensional gate before anyone else interferes. This subordinate quickly obeys, channeling his energy to stabilize a massive swirling vortex of dark purple light. Eldmia Iga watches in absolute desperation, trying to comprehend how a single monster can possess such terrifying strength, staring up at the looming threat while realizing his current power level isn't even close to enough. But Enkantoru merely looks down at his own hand as raw magical energy crackles across his palm, clicking his tongue in annoyance as if this entire world-ending conquest is just a minor inconvenience. Eldmia Iga's eyes snap wide open as a sudden realization cuts through his pain, connecting Cheryl's warning about molten iron to the terrifying raw magic the Demon Lord is wielding, prompting our battered hero to flash a bloody, reckless grin as he decides to risk it all, which immediately catches Enkantoro off guard, his smug satisfaction turning into pure irritation. Screaming at the top of his lungs, the blue-haired warrior launches himself forward in a desperate charge, while the arrogant Demon Lord prepares a purple-infused strike to end his life once and for all, only for Eldmia to throw a massive handful of dirt directly into his opponent's face, leaving the mighty Enkantoro completely blinded and coughing in absolute disbelief at this dirty tactic. But before the furious monster can complain about cheap parlor tricks, our boy draws his backup blade, leaping directly onto the demon's massive shoulders to deliver a devastating surprise strike. Eldmia Ega drives his backup blade deep into the Demon Lord's shoulder, drawing a massive spray of blood, leaving Enkantoro to scream in absolute fury as he clutches his freshly punctured flesh. But our blue-haired hero just smirks, pointing out that the monster is merely inflating himself with raw magic, explaining that unless he is some kind of god, his physical body has a very strict limit, which makes the mighty Demon Lord visibly sweat as he realizes his bluff has been completely called, prompting Eldmia to channel his own volatile energy directly into the blade with a maniacal grin, sending a massive agonizing shockwave of overloaded magic and blood erupting straight through Enkantoru's body. This terrified Demon Lord panics, screaming at the top of his lungs for this lunatic to get away, but our boy refuses to let go, promising to pump him full of energy until he explodes, leaving a furious Enkantoro to grit his teeth and vow to make the brat experience it firsthand. As the volatile energy surges through the blade, the pure raw magic begins to overflow, leaving Eldmia Iga to grit his teeth as he forces the massive power directly into his enemy. But the sheer volume of this chaotic magic is almost too much for a human body to channel, forcing our blue-haired hero to push past his physical limits to keep the devastating flow going, until a sudden spray of fresh blood paints the stone pillars of the ruined chamber. At that exact moment, Cheryl leaps into the fray, wrapping her legs around the Demon Lord's neck, leaving a completely bewildered Enkantoro to scream in absolute fury at her stubborn refusal to die, while the fierce red-haired warrior screams for her ally to strike before the monster can break free, prompting Eldmia Ega to raise his glowing sword, pouring every last drop of his remaining strength into it, before bringing the blade down in a brutal slash that tears right through the helpless Demon Lord. Eldmia Iga delivers brutal downward slash while Cheryl keeps the struggling Demon Lord pinned down, sending a massive wave of raw magical energy tearing straight through Enkantoro's chest, leaving the arrogant monster to scream in absolute agony as blood splatters across the chamber. Meanwhile, the blue-haired youth watches his master fall in complete horror, his hands glowing with purple magic. But Enkantoru desperately orders his terrified subordinate to ignore him and focus entirely on the gate. This loyal lackey turns back to his task, only to freeze as a bright light flares behind him, realizing too late that the party's resilient mage has already recovered and targeted him, with Lily leaping through the air to ambush him with her heavy wooden staff raised high, screaming that she won't let them complete their evil plan as she closes the distance, before bringing her staff down in a devastating strike that smashes directly into the startled subordinate. Lily stands victoriously over the defeated subordinate, ready to deliver the final blow with her staff, but she suddenly freezes in sheer panic as a sinister magical pressure begins to fill the room, leaving the bleeding lackey to smirk as he activates a glowing pink magic circle with his final breath, which forces the startled mage to jump back as crackling purple lightning surges across the stone floor, and in an instant the massive dimensional gate fully stabilizes into a swirling vortex of pure chaos. Blinding light erupts from the portal, forcing Cheryl and Eldmia Iga to shield their eyes from the blast, while our battered blue-haired hero screams in absolute horror as their worst nightmare officially comes to life, only for a terrifying fanged grin to spread across the Demon Lord's face amidst the chaotic energy, as Enkantoro unleashes a deafening roar while his muscles bulge with a massive influx of raw power, prompting our battered hero to grit his teeth, realizing the Monsetsnar is about to amplify his strength even further. A sudden violent burst of pink energy erupts, blasting Eldmia Iga and Cheryl backward through the air, sliding heavily across the stone floor as our blue-haired hero barely manages to stabilize himself, gritting his teeth in confusion as he tries to figure out if the monster just self-destructed. But the cowardly Demon Lord is actually running away, using that blast as a desperate distraction, sprinting directly toward the massive swirling dimensional gate to make his grand escape. Refusing to let him slip away, Eldmia Aiga tightly grips his sword as blue aura flares up, while Encantora laughs hysterically, gloating that his victory is guaranteed and their country is completely finished, only for the arrogant monster to freeze as a sudden terrifying pressure locks onto his back. With our battered hero standing tall, radiating a massive surge of pure, vengeful magical energy, screaming in absolute fury that the Demon Lord isn't leaving this chamber alive. Pushing off the stone floor with a burst of raw speed, Eldmia Iga launches himself forward, leaving the fleeing Demon Lord's eyes to widen in absolute shock as death catches up, because our blue-haired hero completely closes the gap before the monster can even cross the threshold, lining up a flawless, cold-blooded strike aimed directly at the arrogant villain's neck, and with one clean, brutal swing, he completely decapitates Enkantoro in a massive spray of blood, as the Demon Lord's headless body and severed head fly backward into the swirling vortex. Our reckless hero dives headfirst straight into the unstable dimensional gate right after them, prompting a horrified Cheryl to scream his name in vain as the portal begins to close. Meanwhile, on the other side of the rift, a massive purple vortex erupts in a sunny canyon, where a waiting demon cultist ecstatically celebrates their perfectly stable and highly successful invasion gate. Standing in a sunny canyon, a horned demon commander orders his troops to prepare for the invasion, while his subordinate praises Encantoru's success, prompting the smug commander to brag about his little brother. But their celebration is cut short as the dimensional gate suddenly flares to life with pink energy, leaving the commander to smirk in anticipation, fully expecting his victorious brother to step through, only for Eldmia Iga to calmly walk out of the portal with lightning crackling around him. This completely breaks the commander's brain, his smug grin instantly vanishing as he stares at the stranger. Our blue-haired hero stands silently with his sword drawn, completely ignoring the massive army before him. Suddenly, a round object comes flying out of the swirling vortex right behind him, landing with a heavy thud to reveal the severed head of their supposedly invincible leader, forcing the commander to stare in absolute, paralyzing horror at his brother's lifeless face. This demon soldier stare in absolute disbelief, unable to comprehend what just rolled out of the portal, recognizing the lifeless, severed head of their supposedly invincible leader lying in the dirt, sending a wave of pure panic through the ranks as they realize a mere kid defeated him, while Eldmia Iga stands quietly in the mist, his face shadowed and his sword still drawn. Terrified subordinates immediately turn to their commander, begging for orders on how to handle this monster. But the commander remains dead silent, his jaw clenching as pure rage begins to boil over, unleashing a furious scream as he demands to know what our boy did to his brother. Facing down the entire army alone, the brave warrior doesn't even flinch at the massive threat, letting out a bloody, confident smirk that completely mocks their overwhelming numbers and terrifying threats. Silently observing his new surroundings and preparing to turn this demon invasion into a total slaughter. Facing the massive demon army, Eldmia Aiga realizes he has bitten off way more than he can chew, his hand trembling on his bloody hilt as he remembers his magic reserves are completely tapped out. But before he can panic, the furious demon commander screams in absolute rage at his brother's killer, demanding to know how a mere human defeated Encantoru while vowing to hack him to pieces, promising to slaughter every single person on the other side of the gate to avenge his brother. But our bloody hero just stands there, his mind racing as he cooks up a desperate plan, casually telling the massive army to just try it, which completely catches the arrogant commander off guard. Gesturing toward the portal, Eldmia Iga confidently asks if they really thought the kingdom wouldn't notice them, flashing a bloody smirk while bluffing that 100 elite soldiers are waiting on the other side, leaving the terrified demon subordinates to sweat as they realize this kid might be telling the truth. This demon commander pauses, genuinely rattled by the thought of an elite human army waiting for them, while Eldmia Iga struggles to maintain his smug poker face despite his body screaming in agony. But the commander's worry instantly melts away into a sinister, fanged grin as he calls the bluff, ordering a trembling subordinate to bring out their ultimate trump card to settle the score. This immediately sends a cold shiver down our blue-haired hero's spine as he senses impending doom. And sure enough, a demon soldier struggles to wheel out a massive, heavy contraption onto the field. Eldmia Iga gasps in sheer disbelief, completely overwhelmed by the sudden spike in magical pressure, revealing a colossal glowing purple orb that radiates an absolutely absurd amount of raw magical energy, with the smug commander explaining he originally wanted to save this devastating weapon for political leverage, before screaming that he will use its power to burn the entire human kingdom to absolute ash. This panicked subordinate begs Lord Dakan to stop, warning him they lack permission to use the weapon. But the commander grabs his shoulder, completely terrified of the imaginary elite army waiting on the other side, letting out a manic, unhinged laugh as he decides to break protocol to save his own skin. Meanwhile, Eldmia Iga sweats bullets as he realizes his bluff worked a little too well, staring in horror at the massive glowing orb that is clearly a magical weapon of mass destruction, imagining the absolute devastation if a bomb of that scale actually detonates inside the human kingdom, realizing the entire invasion gate was probably built just to transport this single apocalyptic device. Our bloody hero grits his teeth in pure disgust, cursing these monsters for their sheer ruthlessness. But the demon commander draws his sword, screaming for his troops to push the weapon through the portal, sending a squad of soldiers charging forward to roll the massive bomb straight toward our exhausted warrior. A massive horde of demon soldiers charges forward, completely surrounding Eldmia Iga at the portal, leaving our bloody hero to grit his teeth, determined to stop this invasion at all costs. As a painful memory of a burning village flashes through his mind, fueling his resolve. But with multiple blades closing in, his exhausted body struggles to find a way out, until a sudden, blinding pink light erupts from the dimensional gate directly behind him, forcing Eldmia Iga to glance back in utter confusion as the magical energy surges, only for Cheryl and his loyal allies to leap through the portal with weapons raised, with the fierce red-haired warrior shouting an apology for taking so long to find a weapon. And in an instant, the reinforcements crash into the demon ranks, sparking a chaotic melee. Eldmia Iga watches in stunned relief as Cheryl promises to handle the small fry for him. Eldmia Iga flashes a bloody, unhinged grin as he prepares to make one final desperate gamble, winding up to throw his glowing sword straight at the massive apocalyptic device before him, while the furious demon commander screams in realization that the elite human army was a total bluff. But our boy ignores the shouting, channeling every single drop of his remaining magic into his blade, letting out a deafening battle cry as he puts everything he has left into this single strike, and with a massive heave, he hurls his glowing weapon directly at the core of the bomb, only for the blade to collide with a sudden glowing pink barrier protecting the weapon, prompting the smug commander to laugh hysterically, gloating that physical attacks can't even scratch their ultimate defense, as the sword tip desperately grinds against the crackling energy shield in a shower of sparks, before the immense pressure completely shatters his blade, leaving our hero weaponless and in deep trouble. This demon commander's jaw drops in absolute shock as he witnesses the impossible unfold, because Eldmia Iga's shattered sword tip actually manages to crack their ultimate magical barrier, leaving his terrified subordinates to scream in panic as the barrier begins to fail, and with a sharp snap, deep fractures rapidly spread across the glowing energy shield, directly destabilizing the massive apocalyptic weapon as it begins to leak volatile energy. Watching his desperate gamble pay off, our bloody hero lets out a triumphant grin, while the panicked demon soldiers scramble to flee before the entire device detonates. Meanwhile, the stunned commander stands completely frozen in the blinding light of the overload, unable to comprehend how a mere human could possess such devastating magical power. As Eldmia Iga collapses to the ground, his body completely drained of all energy. Eldmia Iga lies paralyzed on the dirt, his bloody face frozen in absolute panic, realizing his battered body has finally hit its absolute limit after that final desperate strike. But there is zero time to rest as a blinding pink glare suddenly catches his eye, because the cracked apocalyptic weapon is officially overloading, threatening to vaporize the entire canyon. Staring death in the face, our exhausted hero can only watch the blinding light expand, only for several familiar hands to suddenly reach out from the portal behind him, with Cheryl and his loyal allies grabbing his limp body to drag him away, pulling him backward through the closing dimensional gate just a split second before disaster strikes, leaving the unstable, magical bomb to detonate in a colossal, world-shaking eruption of pure energy, which completely engulfs the terrified demon commander as his entire army is consumed by the blast. A massive fiery explosion completely consumes the canyon, vaporizing the remaining demon army in an instant. While back on the other side, the dimensional gate violently surges with unstable magical energy, as our exhausted heroes are violently spat back onto the cold stone floor, leaving a battered and bloody Eldmia Iga to slip away into cold, blissful unconsciousness. Hours or maybe days pass in complete darkness before his heavy eyelids finally begin to flutter open, slowly blinking away the blurry haze as his consciousness gradually returns to him, only to find himself lying comfortably in a clean bed with his chest tightly wrapped in bandages. Sitting up slowly, our boy wonders if he has somehow survived yet another near-death experience, but his quiet confusion is suddenly interrupted by a familiar voice welcoming him back to the living, revealing Walter standing by the door to explain that they are currently safe inside a Royal Capital hospital. Walter stands by the bed, apologizing because they never expected a double-horned demon to show up, explaining that he heard all about the dimensional portal and the enemy's secret weapon, before giving our blue-haired hero full credit for stopping the entire apocalyptic invasion. While Walter bows in deep gratitude, Eldmia modestly insists he couldn't have done it alone, suddenly panicking as he asks if his loyal allies actually made it out alive, only for Walter to reassure him that everyone is safe and currently laying low. This immediately raises red flags for Eldmia, who wonders why they must hide a massive victory, until the cloaked man suddenly shifts the mood, admitting he has another motive for visiting, catching our boy completely off guard with a mysterious proposal that changes the subject entirely, as the serious man locks eyes with him, preparing to get straight to the point. Walter drops a massive bombshell asking our bandaged hero if he wants to officially become a knight, explaining that the kingdom's higher-ups are incredibly interested in his absurd combat prowess and quick judgment, pitching this prestigious title as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to honor his legendary achievements. But Eldmia Iga just stares down, thoughtfully rubbing his chin as he weighs the sudden offer, letting out a quiet sigh before delivering an answer that is bound to break some hearts, casually declining the prestigious knighthood while Walter stands there in absolute jaw-dropping shock, slipping into his clothes while pointing out that the kingdom's ulterior motives are way too obvious. This catches Walter completely off guard, his face tightening as he asks what the kid is implying. But our boy just steps forward, ready to lay all his cards right on the table, bluntly stating that the human kingdom is currently being pushed to the absolute brink by the demons. Walter's face completely drops as he realizes this kid just saw right through their entire political cover-up, with Eldmia Iga pointing out how bizarre it was to send amateur adventurers instead of the actual army, pacing across the room as he bluntly accuses the kingdom of lacking the actual troops to deploy, getting right in Walter's face to roast them for desperately offering knighthoods to random rookies. Turning toward the door, our boy flatly refuses to become a glorified meat shield for the corrupt higher-ups, prompting Walter to argue that an official title would actually help him hunt down more demons. But Eldmia Iga's cold blue eye narrows as he resolves to get his bloody vengeance on his own terms, leaving the serious messenger to quietly call out his name in a desperate bid to stop him, finally admitting that the human kingdom is indeed facing a critical shortage of capable soldiers. Yet Walter insists they don't hand out titles to just anyone, genuinely believing Eldmia is their ultimate hope. Walter delivers a parting warning, reminding our boy that plenty of powerful eyes are already watching him. But Eldmia Iga merely stares back with absolute resolve, completely unfazed by the looming political pressure. Stepping outside, the bustling streets of the royal capital stretch out in every direction, only for our hero to suddenly freeze when he spots a very familiar face waiting nearby. It turns out Cheryl is leaning against a stone wall, looking as intense and unbothered as ever, and Eldmia Iga immediately jogs over, jokingly asking if she actually came to pick him up. Unfortunately, the fierce warrior just stares back with a completely deadpan, unimpressed expression, leaving Eldmia Iga to sweat drop, completely bewildered by her incredibly cold and silent reaction. Cheryl simply sighs, noting he looks surprisingly energetic for someone who just fought deadly demons, before turning on her heel and ordering him to follow her to their next destination. Following her lead, Eldmia Iga finds himself standing inside a spacious, well-stocked weapon shop. Our boy looks around in confusion, wondering why she dragged him to a weapon shop of all places. But Assisir explains that her father, Sir Ekhoff, wants him to pick out their absolute best blade, prompting Eldmia to thoughtfully touch his chin as he remembers the sheer intensity of his last battle, recalling how his previous sword completely shattered against the overwhelming magical power of that double-horned demon. So he decides to ask for something that can actually handle his insane level of power. Calling out to the shopkeeper, who looks up from his work with a curious expression, Eldmia casually asks for a sword capable of handling energy far stronger than standard aura, leaving the sweating blacksmith to stammer that they don't carry ridiculously expensive dwarven-made weapons here, while Azilier glares at him in disbelief, dryly suggesting he show at least a little bit of restraint. Azilier tells the blue-haired youth to just pick a practical weapon instead of complaining, leaving the grumpy shopkeeper to quietly mutter to himself as they prepare to leave. Shortly after, they arrive at a massive, pristine white estate under a clear blue sky. A polite butler serves them tea, requesting they wait a moment for the Margrave's arrival, while Azilier admits this is her very first time visiting Lady Lagunas' grand estate. But their quiet conversation is cut short when the blue-haired youth spots something outside, peering through the window to see a massive, unfamiliar army standing in the courtyard. She notes that the powerful Eshnua Empire has sent an official invitation to the Margrave. As she explains, the Margrave wants to hear his first-hand account of the demon incident. This unexpected summons officially turns their attention toward the massive and formidable Eshnua Empire. This formidable nation holds the absolute largest territory and boasts the most overwhelming military power. But their biggest flex is being the only land capable of producing a true hero, as the heavy double doors of the grand estate slowly creak open to reveal a visitor, leaving Eldmia Iga to blink in surprise as he looks up to see who just entered. It turns out to be Cheryl, standing tall in a sharp uniform and greeting him with a smile, while Lady Lagunas politely welcomes her, thanking the young warrior for accepting the grand invitation. And our blue-haired hero can't help but tease her about how incredibly mature she has grown, prompting Cheryl to admit how difficult it has been to find any time to meet up. Eldmia gently acknowledges the immense struggles she must have faced to reach her current high position, but she simply smiles, happy that her demanding role as Margrave honors her late father's legacy. Eldmia Iga listens intently, his expression calm as he prepares to recount his wild journey. Cheryl shifts the conversation, demanding to hear every single detail about the recent demon invasion, starting all the way back from their very first clash with bandits at the farm. As the tea sits untouched, the sheer weight of their past struggles hangs heavy in the room. Realizing the demonic threat has already managed to infiltrate deep into the heart of the kingdom, this shocking revelation makes the young Margrave question the true motive behind her sudden imperial invitation, leaving our blue-haired hero completely bewildered by her sudden shift into a deeply somber mood. before she quietly apologizes and prepares to ask him for a massive, life-changing favor. She desperately begs him to accompany her to the Empire to meet the legendary hero, with a massive swirling blue portal suddenly activating to pave the way for their next grand adventure. Stepping through the portal, our hero's boot touches down on the paved streets of a brand new land, with Eldmia Ega standing tall in his sharp uniform, ready to face whatever lies ahead. But his jaw immediately drops as he takes in the sheer scale of his new surroundings, staring up at a massive, breathtaking cathedral that towers over the bustling streets like a mountain, officially confirming that they have finally arrived in the heart of the legendary Eshnua Empire. Suddenly, a pathetic groan behind him completely ruins the majestic atmosphere, catching our boy off guard, revealing a miserable Revi clutching her stomach as she struggles to survive her portal sickness, looking absolutely green and ready to lose her lunch right there on the pristine imperial pavement. Meanwhile, the wealthy citizens of the capital stroll past grand art galleries without a single care, while children play happily around the central fountain, completely oblivious to the looming demonic threat. Staring out in sheer awe, Cheryl can't help but marvel at the breathtaking scenery before her, pointing out how incredibly peaceful and tranquil the bustling imperial capital feels compared to home. Though Eldmia Ega remains silent, knowing a brutal war is still raging just beyond their borders, before he suddenly turns to her, questioning if this diplomatic mission is actually a safe move, especially since she only brought 5 servants along with him as her sole bodyguard. Cheryl calmly explains that bringing a massive army would only raise immediate suspicion with the Empire, but their quiet conversation is suddenly cut short by a looming shadow stepping into their path, revealing a remarkably handsome nobleman who introduces himself as their official imperial guide, Marquis Pende. Our red-haired Margrave politely returns the greeting, playing the political game perfectly to keep up appearances, until the Marquis points directly at our hero, questioning his sudden addition to the official roster. Marquis Pende narrows his golden eye, quietly processing the sudden addition of our blue-haired hero, leaving Eldmia Ega to offer an incredibly awkward laugh to ease the sudden tension, before the Marquis smoothly gestures toward their waiting carriage to get them moving without delay, prompting Cheryl to politely thank him while our boy tags along with a nervous sweat drop. Once they are settled, Eldmia Ega can't help but wonder why they want her to meet this hero, as Cheryl reveals that the Empire's invitation was never actually about investigating the demon incident, explaining that they actually want her to help train their newly selected hero for a week. This completely baffles Eldmia, who demands to know why they would ask a foreign Margrave for help, grumpily crossing his arms as he dismisses the Imperial higher-ups as a bunch of show-off weirdos, until a sudden terrifying realization hits him, making his eyes widen as he connects the dots. Eldmia realizes the Empire's invitation is a massive power play showcasing their ultimate trump card. Our boy narrows his eyes, instantly seeing right through their thinly veiled diplomatic flex. Cheryl agrees, explaining that boasting about their savior is a silent warning to stay in line, leaving them both to sweat at how incredibly petty and manipulative high-level politics can get, especially since the Empire is likely planning to annex their entire kingdom once the demon threat is gone. As their carriage rolls through the streets, Eldmia quietly processes this terrifying post-war reality, until they finally pull up to the breathtakingly massive gates of the prestigious Elios Academy. Stepping inside, the duo walks down a grand sunlit hallway to begin their week-long undercover training mission, leaving our blue-haired hero completely stunned by the sheer luxury of these imperial facilities, until Cheryl suddenly gasps, her eyes lighting up as she spots someone unexpected ahead. Cheryl excitedly runs up to a massive bearded man, calling him her master as Eldmia watches in surprise. This giant man laughs heartily, teasing Cheryl about her impressive new official title as Margrave Lagunas. Cheryl proudly introduces the towering man to Eldmia, explaining he was her childhood magic teacher. This massive teacher introduces himself as Ragnell Pandez, a prestigious professor and exclusive kingdom mage. Eldmia politely shakes his hand, completely shocked by the sheer physical presence of this supposed mage. Our boy silently notes that the guy looks way more like a frontline warrior than a spellcaster. Eldmia bluntly points out his insane build, admitting the giant doesn't look like a typical mage at all. Ragnell just laughs it off, proudly boasting about the classic philosophy of keeping a sound body. He promises to support them during their stay, offering to help Eldmia with any questions or concerns, leaving the trio to look out over the massive, checkered courtyard where Imperial soldiers are lining up. Ragnall asks if everyone has arrived, only to hear that the legendary hero is running late, leaving the giant professor to rub his temples in sheer frustration over the guy's terrible punctuality, while the other elite students grumble about how the savior is letting fame go to his head. Standing nearby, Eldmia Ega quietly observes the growing tension, wondering what kind of person this hero actually is, noting that the atmosphere in this prestigious academy feels surprisingly toxic for a place housing a savior, until a smug, lazy voice suddenly echoes through the hall, offering a completely insincere apology for being late. This prompts both Eldmia and Cheryl to turn around, expecting to see a legendary warrior, only to find a flashy, orange-haired punk strolling in with his arms draped over 2 beautiful girls. making our blue-haired hero stare in absolute disbelief at the sheer audacity of this episode's savior, who can't help but wonder if the Empire's ultimate trump card is actually just a massive joke. This orange-haired hero immediately zeroes in on Cheryl, completely ignoring his own massive tardiness. He casually asks if she is the foreign Margrave who is supposed to be his sparring partner, prompting Cheryl to offer a polite bow, only for the arrogant punk to immediately cut her off. She glares at him with absolute disdain as he shamelessly tries to ask her out after class, but the sleazy savior ignores her cold look and boldly places his hand on her shoulder. Before he can slide any closer, Eldmia Iga steps in and firmly grabs the guy's wrist, leaving the self-proclaimed hero completely stunned by this sudden and incredibly bold physical interruption, while our blue-haired protagonist unleashes a terrifying aura, coldly asking if the punk has a death wish, sending a massive wave of shock through the giant professor and the surrounding elite students. This arrogant savior simply sneers, asking our boy if he even realizes who he is messing with. Eldmia Iga maintains a vice-like grip on the arrogant hero's wrist, refusing to back down. Instead of getting angry, the orange-haired punk bursts into a wide grin and praises our boy's guts. This self-proclaimed savior immediately turns to Cheryl, demanding to know who this bold bodyguard actually is. He sneers with amusement, mocking all the other foreign representatives as nothing but boring cowards. Our blue-haired hero glares back coldly, demanding that the punk show at least a basic level of respect. Before things can escalate, the giant professor steps in to break up the tense standoff. Ragnell places a calming hand on Eldmia's shoulder, reminding him to keep his emotions in check. Professor Ragnell then turns his lecture toward the hero, who simply shrugs it off dismissively. Eldmia quietly observes the exchange, his suspicion of this so-called savior growing by the second, leaving the nervous academy assistant to quickly steer the conversation back to their official training schedule. This nervous assistant introduces Cheryl to the class, prompting her to offer a polite greeting, but the elite students immediately start whispering, mocking her tragic family history and her supposedly pathetic territory, leaving Cheryl to endure their petty insults silently while keeping her composure under their judgmental gazes. Before the tension can boil over, Professor Ragnell bucks orders to prepare for their practical combat lesson, prompting the assistant to slam his hand down and activate a glowing blue magic circle, sending a surge of mana rippling across the checkered floor to construct the training arena, as a massive pillar of light erupts from the ground, shaking the entire academy hall, which quickly solidifies into a high-tech training platform topped with a glowing pink halo, revealing a state-of-the-art mock battlefield that leaves the foreign visitors completely speechless. With the stage officially set, our heroes prepare to show these arrogant imperial elites their true power. Eldmia Iga stares up at the massive glowing ring floating high above the training arena, prompting the bespectacled assistant to proudly explain this marvel of imperial illusion technology, which uses sensory manipulation to perfectly simulate the high stakes of real combat. Before our boy can fully process this, Professor Ragnall steps up to initiate the mock battle, commanding the two chosen students to manifest their training gear out of thin air, causing a brilliant blue sword to materialize directly into the young swordsman's hand, while his opponent summons a glowing pink staff that crackles with pure magical energy. Staring in absolute disbelief, Eldmia can't believe they can just conjure weapons like that, until the professor chops his hand down to officially start the high-speed duel, sending the swordsman leaping forward with his blade raised to strike down his opponent. This female student's pink staff flares to life, channeling a massive surge of golden magical energy as she leaps through the air to unleash a devastating beam of pure destructive power. But the agile swordsman slides right under the blast, keeping his blue blade ready to strike, closing the distance instantly to clash his glowing weapon directly against her defensive staff. Watching from the sidelines, Eldmia Iga sweats at the sheer intensity of this high-stakes duel, realizing these students are genuinely trying to kill each other rather than just practicing their skills. Suddenly, the young swordsman's boot slips on the polished floor, completely ruining his perfect offensive momentum, leaving him cursing his bad luck as his leg gives out at the worst possible moment, which is all the opening his opponent needs to charge up another massive point-blank spell, engulfing the poor kid in a massive fiery explosion that completely blows him away. Eldmia panics, thinking the poor kid just got vaporized, but the assistant calmly tells him to keep watching, as the student's seemingly destroyed torso begins to pixelate and glow with golden magical particles, revealing he is completely unharmed as he grumbles about his sudden defeat on the battlefield, prompting Professor Ragnall to officially declare Mari the winner of this incredibly intense mock duel. Confused by the lack of blood, Eldmia listens as the assistant explains the ring's advanced illusion magic, which reads the user's mind to project hyper-realistic scenarios directly onto the training platform, simulating everything from weapons and magic to the actual sensation of pain and physical wounds, allowing these elite students to fight with lethal intent without actually risking their lives, leaving our blue-haired hero deeply unsettled by how far the Empire's magical technology has surpassed his homeland. When the assistant suggests Cheryl should fight next, Ragnell quickly declines to protect her from unnecessary exhaustion. This nervous assistant stammers that these instructions came directly from the Marquis himself, prompting Professor Ragnell to narrow his eyes as he processes this sudden political interference before turning on his heel to look up at the Academy's high balcony, where Marquis Esdell stands looking down with an incredibly smug and calculating expression. Suddenly, a mysterious woman approaches the Marquis, noting she had no idea he was visiting, revealing that he has already arranged a special mock battle for our visiting Margrave, plotting to pit Cheryl against a formidable opponent instead of letting her face the hero, aiming to give her a brutal reality check, while Eldmia Ega and the others watch from below, focusing on the fierce red-haired girl who is set to be Cheryl's next opponent, while Professor Ragnall calls out the transparent plot, promising to handle the Marquis himself. Before Ragnall can protest, Cheryl steps forward and demands to take the stage herself. This giant professor tries to stop her, but she just smiles and insists she can handle it, proudly reminding him of exactly whose elite apprentice she is with a confident grin, leaving the massive mage to look at her with a mixture of pride and lingering worry. Sweating profusely, the assistant quickly announces that her opponent will be the formidable Lady Esalua, prompting the blonde elite to ask the lazy hero if she needs to hold back at all. But the smug punk just shrugs, winking as he admits the only person catching his eye is Eldmia Iga, who stands nearby looking completely unbothered by the sleazy savior's creepy gaze. Our boy quietly warns Cheryl that this match is an obvious trap, but she just smiles knowingly, tossing her jacket aside as she prepares to crush their pathetic little scheme head-on. This assistant steps up to announce the next mock battle between the blonde elite and Margrave Reeve, prompting the arrogant blonde opponent to instantly conjure a glowing green staff with a smug grin, while Reeve calmly summons her own pink magical weapon, looking entirely unfazed by the upcoming clash, leaving Eldmia Iga sweating in the crowd, wondering why on earth she is stepping onto the battlefield, until Professor Ragnell chuckles, pointing out that the girl has clearly been playing dumb this whole time, telling our shocked protagonist to just sit back and watch her true power unfold. With the tension reaching its peak, the bespectacled assistant chops his hand down to start the match, sending the blonde opponent charging forward at high speed to end the duel in a single strike, leaping high into the air to unleash a massive, blazing pillar of light directly at her target. But Reeve just stands there with a completely blank expression, waiting for the blast to hit. Eldmia Iga screams at the top of his lungs, desperately telling Reeve to dodge the incoming attack. But Reeve just stands there completely unfazed as a massive hexagonal barrier blocks the explosion effortlessly, leaving our blue-haired hero staring in absolute shock at her insane defensive capabilities. Her arrogant blonde opponent sweats in disbelief, unable to comprehend how easily her ultimate move was neutralized. Up on the balcony, Marquis Esdell grips the railing in absolute shock at this sudden turn of events, while Asilia Enderinia gasps, realizing the girl just cast high-tier magic without chanting a single word. Gritting her teeth, the blonde elite finally acknowledges Reeve's strength but refuses to accept defeat so easily, raising her glowing green staff once more to channel an even more devastating spell, as she summons a massive golden magic circle, declaring she won't hold back any of her power, firing 3 massive beams of sacred light directly at Reeve to end this duel. Reeve glares back with absolute focus, completely unfazed by the massive onslaught heading her way. She leaps gracefully into the air, easily dodging the devastating beams of light that shatter the floor, and with a swift spin of her pink staff, she prepares to launch her own counterattack, locking her eyes onto her opponent with a gaze that promises absolute defeat. Refusing to back down, the smug blonde elite raises her hand to unleash her ultimate spell, summoning a massive glowing green spear that crackles with an overwhelming amount of magical energy, declaring the activation of her legendary throne spear to crush the foreign Margrave once and for all, sending the colossal weapon hurtling down from the sky directly toward our orange-haired heroine. But Revi simply sighs, activating her mysterious oath form as her eyes glow with pure power, calmly invoking her ultimate shield to block the devastating attack without breaking a single sweat. Revi's massive red shield materializes, absorbing the impact with a deafening metallic clang. A colossal translucent warrior emerges to block the legendary spear with absolute ease, leaving the arrogant orange-haired hero looking genuinely surprised by this unexpected display of power, while Eldmia Ega stares in absolute disbelief, completely stunned by the sheer scale of her magic. Professor Ragnell calmly explains that this is the legendary shield of Etisiel, a family heirloom, revealing that House Reviant has wielded unmatched defensive magic for generations to protect the kingdom's borders, earning them the prestigious title of Margrave and the reputation as the nation's ultimate shield. Ragnell recalls being invited 10 years ago by his old friend to tutor the Margrave's children, remembering how young Lagunis stood out with her incredible talent and sharp understanding of magic, until the tragic day the Demon King's army overran their territory and shattered their legendary defense. Back then, the old tutor sat absolute despair, cursing his own powerlessness as their domain fell, but seeing her standing tall today brings a sudden spark of hope back to his eyes, because Reeve is finally back, ready to reclaim her rightful place as the ultimate shield, proudly noting how much her powerful silhouette resembles her late father's legendary presence. Meanwhile, Eldmia Iga watches her with a mixture of awe and deep concern, remembering the days when she was helpless and tied up while they fought off monsters, gritting her teeth in frustration at her own inability to stand on the front lines. But those days of weakness are long gone as she steps forward with absolute confidence. Her massive summoned warrior easily deflects the incoming legendary spear with its colossal shield, shattering the opponent's ultimate attack into harmless sparkling shards to end the duel. Revi commands her massive summon to counterattack, her eyes burning with absolute determination, as the colossal red warrior towers over her arrogant opponent, raising its massive glowing sword, leaving the blonde elite staring upward in sheer terror as her entire world crumbles. With a single devastating sweep, the giant warrior brings its massive blade crashing down, unleashing a massive shockwave that tears through the arena and completely shatters her defense, prompting the panicked assistant to wave his arms and call an end to the match, officially declaring Revi the winner as she stands victoriously with a bright, cheerful smile. As the glowing red particles slowly dissipate across the heavily damaged training platform, this defeated blonde elite lies flat on her back, completely paralyzed by her sudden loss, while the surrounding crowd of students mutters in disbelief at how easily their top genius fell. Looking down from the high balcony, Isekai Enderinia stares coldly at the defeated blonde elite on the floor, muttering that her pathetic performance proves she will never be more than a fourth princess. Turning to the Marquis, Isekai demands to know how a supposedly weak Margrave could possess such power, prompting the smug noble to wonder if they are witnessing the legendary remnants of Atisil's ancient strength. Though the cold princess instantly dismisses his history lesson as nothing more than irrelevant ancient gossip. Gripping the stone railing tightly, she proudly declares that the Empire stands completely alone at the top, her eyes narrowing as she refuses to let some foreign upstart steal their glorious spotlight, until a wicked thought crosses her mind, making her turn back to the Marcus with a grin. She suggests raising the stakes by pitting this newly revealed Margrave directly against their legendary hero. While down in the arena, Eldmia Iga cheers happily for Revi as she celebrates her flawless victory. Esalua sighs in defeat on the floor, completely humiliated by how easily she was overpowered, while Sigmul bursts out laughing, openly praising the Margrave's incredible beauty and combat skills, prompting his purple-haired companion to question his sanity for treating a serious duel like a joke, until an academy assistant nervously approaches Sigmul to whisper some highly classified information in his ear, causing the arrogant hero's playful expression to instantly harden into a look of pure shock. Down in the crowd, Eldmia Iga perks up as a loud shout suddenly echoes across the arena, revealing Sigmul standing in the center of the platform, boldly calling out the mastermind above, looking directly up at the high balcony to address the smug Marquis watching from the shadows, as he points backward and flatly refuses to participate in their rigged match against the Margrave, leaving Eldmia Iga and Professor Ragnell completely baffled by the hero's sudden, unexpected rebellion. Isekai Enderinia questions Sigmel's sudden refusal, reminding him of his supposed desire to fight strong opponents. Sigmul dismisses the Margrave's flashy display, claiming that while her magic looked cool, it was ultimately nothing more than a flashy, inefficient waste of precious mana, arguing that summoning such a massive warrior is too slow and needlessly consumes energy. Before smugly patting Esalua's head and declaring the Margrave is no match for him, he boldly asks Revi if she agrees, prompting her to sarcastically apologize for disappointing him. But she quickly narrows her eyes, adding that if they absolutely insist on a battle, she would much rather have her own blue-haired escort, Eldmia Iga, fight in her place, prompting Isekai Enderinia to look down from the balcony and readily approve the proxy match, leaving Sigmul to mockingly call out Eldmia Iga, daring him to step up and fight. Eldmia Iga notes that the Imperial elites clearly have no intention of backing down, while the scheming Marquis Vende stands alongside Princess Isekai Enderinia, plotting their next move, prompting our blue-haired protagonist to shrug and prepare to do what he does best, stepping forward in his crisp white shirt to teach these arrogant nobles a lesson. Cheryl watches him go with a mixture of nervous sweat and quiet confidence, as Sigmul throws his hands up in absolute delight at the upcoming matchup, his playful grin twisting into something far more sinister and unhinged behind the scenes, declaring his absolute excitement to finally crush a worthy opponent in the arena. Back on the balcony, Marquis Vende notes that everything is playing out exactly as expected, with Princess Isekai Enderinia smiling coldly, knowing the hero won't let this chance slip away. Marquis Vende questions the point of fighting a mere escort instead of the Margrave herself, but Princess Isekai Enderinia simply smiles, noting that the reckless hero made his own choice, explaining that the sky-high magic device only mitigates damage up to a certain critical threshold, meaning anyone who takes a truly massive hit will still suffer real physical injuries, and the only monster capable of dealing that level of destruction is Sigmul himself. Marquis Vende doubts the hero would unleash his full, terrifying power on a simple escort. But Isekai grins sadistically, hoping Eldmia Iga only loses an arm or a leg today, completely unaware that our blue-haired protagonist is far from a helpless victim in this arena. As the two combatants finally face off while the massive crowd holds its collective breath, leaving Professor Ragnall watching from the sidelines with a deeply serious and tense expression. This old tutor watches the arena from afar, fully aware of the princess's transparent, wicked scheme. as he loudly commands both Eldmia Iga and Siegmul to manifest their weapons for the duel. Rivi cheerfully instructs our blue-haired hero to close his hand and imagine his ideal weapon, prompting Eldmia Iga to focus his mind as glowing blue particles begin swirling around his palm. And to his absolute surprise, a sleek, glowing blue sword materializes perfectly in his grip. Suddenly, a massive surge of hostile energy draws his attention back to his opponent, where Siegmul is already channeling a terrifying amount of raw power into his own hands, summoning a colossal glowing orange broadsword that crackles with an incredibly dark and menacing aura. This unhinged hero glares forward with absolute bloodlust, ready to completely obliterate his opponent, leaving Eldmia Iga to sigh in mild amusement at just how crazy this guy truly is. Siegmul grins like a total psychopath, looking at our boy like a kid with a new toy. And the moment the old tutor shouts for the battle to start, the real chaos begins. Because the unhinged instantly vanishes from the arena floor in a burst of blinding speed, leaving Eldmia Iga scanning the empty space in sheer disbelief as his opponent completely disappears from sight. Suddenly, a massive shadow looms overhead as Siegmul dives from the sky with his giant blade. But our blue-haired protagonist reacts instantly, raising his glowing sword to block the devastating overhead strike, which only makes the crazy hero smile wider, thrilled that his wild intuition was actually correct. He gleefully praises Eldmia's incredible strength while putting his entire weight into pushing the kid down, as their legendary weapons clash in a violent shower of sparks that illuminates the entire stadium. This unhinged hero cackles like a maniac, ecstatic to finally find someone capable of blocking his strikes. Siegmul launches a ferocious strike, daring our blue-haired protagonist to try and block his chaotic attack. This unhinged hero swings his massive blade again, demanding more entertainment as sparks fly everywhere. Eldmia Iga grits his teeth in confusion, realizing his opponent's wild swings defy all traditional swordsmanship. Despite the chaotic nature of the assault, every single strike lands with terrifying precision and weight. Siegmul radiates a menacing aura, leaving our boy completely unable to find a single defensive opening. Leaping through the air, the crazy hero unleashes another heavy blow that forces Eldmia backward. A relentless flurry of slashes follows, keeping the pressure high as Siegmul dominates the entire arena. Sweating under the intense strain, Eldmia Iga struggles to keep his guard up against the onslaught. Watching the duel unfold from the high balcony, Walter smugly observes the one-sided beatdown below. He proudly reminds Princess Aziliar and Irenia that they spent an absolute fortune training their ultimate weapon. Aziliar and Irenia narrows her eyes in suspicion, realizing that something about this duel is completely off. Because even though Eldmia Iga is only defending, he is effortlessly withstanding the hero's brutal onslaught, leaving the princess to wonder who this mysterious blue-haired guard actually is under that plain white shirt. While down on the sidelines, Cheryl watches the chaotic clash of blades with a pounding heart, whispering Eldmia Iga's name in silent prayer as she desperately hopes he survives this madness. Suddenly, Siegmul leaps high into the air, preparing to bring his massive weight down on our boy. But Eldmia Iga calmly raises his glowing blue sword to deflect the devastating overhead strike, prompting the unhinged hero to tighten his grip on his massive orange blade with pure excitement, completely unaware that our blue-haired protagonist is merely testing his limits and has everything under control. Until Siegmul launches himself from above once more, aiming a lethal downward slash directly at his head. Eldmia Iga focuses his energy, planning to parry upward and force a clean opening. But the unhinged hero merely grins, completely anticipating our boy's next defensive move, stomping his foot down hard to suddenly shift his entire momentum in midair, leaving Eldmia Iga's eyes to widen in shock as he senses the sudden trap. Because Siegmul completely changes his stance, abandoning his sword to launch a brutal surprise kick, slamming his heavy boot directly into our protagonist's guard with bone-shattering force, sending Eldmia Iga skidding backward across the stone floor in a massive cloud of dust. While Cheryl and Walter watch from the sidelines, their faces pale with sheer disbelief, as Princess Aziliar and Irenia pumps her fist in triumph, convinced the match is already over. With a massive explosion of debris completely consuming the center of the shattered arena, Eldmia Iga sits on the shattered floor, catching his breath amidst the rising dust cloud, while Siegmul rests his massive blade on his shoulder, mockingly apologizing for overdoing his attack, prompting the old tutor to call the match, for Cheryl to suddenly step forward, fiercely declaring that the battle is far from over, much to the old man's surprise, as he turns back to look at the arena, completely baffled by her absolute confidence. Down on the floor, Eldmia Iga grips his knee and prepares to push himself back up, rising to his feet to face the unhinged hero once again without showing any fear, which only makes Siegmul grin wider, genuinely impressed by our boy's unexpected resilience, while Eldmia Iga sarcastically thanks him for the compliment while brushing off the dust. As Princess Aziliar and Irenia watches the tense standoff from above, realizing this duel is far from over, Princess Aziliar and Irenia leans over the balcony railing in a complete rage, screaming at her hero to finish the fight, slamming her clenched fist onto the stone balustrade because she absolutely hates seeing them waste time chatting. Meanwhile, Siegmul casually rests his massive blade on his shoulder, claiming he has completely lost interest in this boring defense. But our blue-haired protagonist merely smiles, calmly declaring that their little warm-up session is officially over. Eldmia Iga readies his glowing blue sword, mockingly asking if he can finally take his turn to attack, leaving the arrogant hero to narrow his eyes in sheer disbelief at the kid's sudden, ridiculous confidence. Siegmul scoffs from across the arena, wondering if this mere escort is just trying to act cool after only blocking, completely unaware of the massive surge of blue magical energy suddenly swirling around our protagonist's boots, until Eldmia Iga instantly vanishes from the spot, leaving nothing but a small puff of dust on the shattered floor, reappearing behind the shocked hero in a blinding flash of speed to deliver a devastating counterstrike. Siegmul's eyes widen in absolute shock as he realizes his opponent has completely vanished. But the unhinged hero barely manages to swing his massive blade around to block the strike, sending both combatants recoiling backward as their weapons clash in another massive burst of energy, leaving Siegmul staring blankly into space, completely unable to comprehend the kid's ridiculous speed. Blue streaks of light zip across the arena floor as our protagonist continues his relentless high-speed assault, while the arrogant hero stands frozen in the center, surrounded by a dizzying blur of motion, prompting Siegmul to grin maniacally as he realizes his opponent was holding back this entire time, until Eldmia Iga plants his foot to launch himself into the air for a final blow, appearing directly above the stunned hero with his glowing blue sword raised high for a devastating strike. But Siegmul merely chuckles, his creepy grin proving he still has a few twisted tricks left. Siegmul swings his massive blade, confidently shouting that Eldmia's attack is far too predictable, but as their weapons clash in a blinding flash of blue and orange light, this unhinged hero suddenly realizes he completely miscalculated his opponent's real trajectory, because Eldmia Iga has already abandoned his sword midair to cock back a massive fist, delivering a brutal, satisfying punch straight to Siegmul's arrogant face with zero hesitation. After landing the devastating blow, our blue-haired protagonist pulls off a flawless mid-air flip, while the self-proclaimed ultimate weapon goes skidding backward across the shattered stone floor, leaving Cheryl and the old tutor staring in absolute, jaw-dropping disbelief at the sudden turn, as even Revi and her companion freeze in shock, completely speechless at the sheer disrespect, and the entire arena crowd watches in stunned silence, realizing the invincible hero just got humbled. Walter stares in absolute shock from the balcony, unable to believe his eyes, while Princess Azilier and Irenia grits her teeth in pure rage at the unbelievable sight. Down in the arena, Siegmul slowly recovers from the punch, a creepy smile spreading across his face, prompting Eldmia Iga to stay on high alert as he prepares for the next round. This unhinged hero cackles with absolute glee, thrilled to finally face a worthy opponent, as he tightens his grip on his massive blade, completely taking back his earlier boredom, before launching himself forward with a wild scream, calling out Eldmia Iga's name in pure ecstasy, bringing his giant orange sword down in a devastating overhead strike that Eldmia barely blocks. But our blue-haired protagonist quickly spins around to deflect the crushing weight of the blow, unleashing a fierce counterattack that sends massive shockwaves rippling across the shattered arena floor. Siegmul swings his massive, glowing orange blade down with terrifying, bloodthirsty intensity, forcing the blue-haired youth to block the crushing weight with his own glowing sword. But the unhinged hero immediately spins into another wild, high-speed aerial assault, leaving our protagonist sweating as he realizes his opponent is swinging massive weapons like toys. Another devastating golden shockwave rips through the air with absolute destructive force, prompting the blue-haired youth to leap high to avoid getting crushed by the impact, which completely catches Siegmul off guard as his target suddenly vanishes from his sight, allowing our hero to zip across the arena in a blinding flash of blue light, deciding it is far too dangerous to trade blows head-on without finding a proper openings, while Siegmul merely a creepy jagged grin, absolutely loving every second of this hunt. Siegmul plants his boots firmly on the ground, channeling a massive surge of fiery orange aura, before launching himself forward like a literal rocket, leaving a blazing trail of golden light, which completely catches the blue-haired youth off guard as he senses the overwhelming pressure. Realizing the unhinged hero can move at a speed that defies all physical limits, while Siegmul cackles maniacally, screaming that he isn't the only one who can wield aura, bringing his twin golden blades down in a ferocious strike that the youth barely blocks, triggering a rapid succession of massive explosions that shake the entire stadium to its core, leaving our protagonist gritting his teeth in sheer desperation as the intense pressure mounts. Because no matter how fast he moves, the crazy hero keeps matching his every step, forcing the blue-haired youth to wonder if his entire strategy has just completely failed. This blue-haired youth and Siegmul clash in mid-air, creating a massive explosion of sparks, landing back on the shattered arena floor as they both brace for their next move. Walter watches the intense battle with deep concern, noting that the hero's power is simply too overwhelming, while Cheryl stands beside him, completely terrified that there might be no way to counter this monster. Down in the dust, the blue-haired youth laughs to himself, refusing to accept being outclassed. Recalling a terrifying demon from his past that radiated the exact same crushing pressure as Siegmul, tightening his grip on his glowing sword, our protagonist prepares to unleash his true strength, his eyes flashing with brilliant blue lightning as a wild, confident grin spreads across his face, completely catching Siegmul off guard as the unhinged hero senses a sudden, terrifying shift in power. Surrounded by a massive burst of blue electrical aura, the blue-haired youth prepares to end this, This blue-haired youth screams that he is going all out too, his blue aura flaring wildly, which only makes Siegmund cackle with pure unhinged excitement at the sudden power boost. As our protagonist stands enveloped in crackling lightning, feeling his senses sharpened beyond human limits. But Siegmund does not care about technicalities, focusing entirely on his blazing orange sword, dual-wielding his massive weapons as he declares that anything interesting is perfectly fine with him. Watching from the sidelines, Walter panics as he realizes the unhinged hero is completely losing his cool, slamming his hand down to activate a magic circle and officially cancel the dangerous match. But the two combatants are already moving too fast, leaving blazing trails of light behind, as Siegmund lunges from above to clash with the blue-haired youth one last time, until a massive defensive barrier suddenly flashes to life, stopping the collision dead in its tracks. This blue-haired youth and Siegmund charge at each other across the shattered arena floor, but a massive, glowing defensive barrier suddenly shoots up from the ground to divide them, forcing both fighters to slam directly into the solid wall of magical energy, triggering a violent explosion of sparks as their momentum is completely shut down. News of this sudden draw quickly reaches the grand halls of the Imperial Senate. Inside, the high-ranking officials are absolutely losing their minds over the humiliating result, desperately demanding to keep the embarrassing news from leaking to the other kingdoms, only to realize that rumors of the match are already spreading like wildfire, prompting the frustrated leaders to blame Princess Azilia and Arinia for rushing the incomplete hero, before nervously asking what their furious princess is planning to do next. Outside the grand double doors of the private office, two heavily armored guards stand watch in silence, while inside a furious fist slams violently against the wooden desk in a fit of absolute rage. As Princess Cecilia Andarinia seethes at her desk, cursing the stubborn frontier nation for ruining her designs, she stands up with clenched fists, furious that years of careful preparation have suddenly gone to waste. Realizing that inviting foreign delegations only exposed her incomplete hero's glaring weaknesses to the entire world, prompting the desperate princess to slump over her desk, wondering where her perfect plan went horribly wrong. But she quickly glares up with renewed venom, insisting that Siegmund is already strong enough for battle, and that the only real obstacle to her absolute victory is that annoying escort, Eldmia Iga, cursing the random nobody who somehow managed to fight her ultimate weapon on completely equal footing, tightly clenching her fist as she vows that this humiliating setback is far from the end. Princess Cecilia Andarinia decides she will make Eldmia Iga take full responsibility for this mess, ordering her servants to immediately prepare a carriage so she can confront him directly. Meanwhile, deep within the cold and silent stone corridors of the Imperial dungeon, Eldmia Iga sits quietly on the floor of his cell, looking completely unbothered by his confinement, his sharp blue eyes showing that he is already anticipating whatever scheme she throws next.